It was meant to be just another tense hearing in family court, until a 3-year-old girl stood up and shouted, "My dad is guilty. I saw everything." The atmosphere changes instantly. The mother faints, the father freezes, and the judge stops everything to hear the girl. What begins as an innocent accusation reveals a web of lies, fraud and betrayals hidden for years. The truth behind that cry will surprise you. In the wood-paneled family court of Oak Ridge County, Pennsylvania, the Tuesday morning proceedings carried on with their usual rhythm of legal jargon and strained emotions. The air conditioner hummed a monotonous background tune to the drama unfolding within these walls. Lives being divided, assets being split, and at the center of it all, a 3-year-old girl with honey-blonde pigtails and eyes that seemed to absorb everything. Judge Martha Simmons, a stern woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun, glanced at her watch. The Johnson divorce proceedings were taking longer than expected. Emily Johnson, 34, sat with perfect posture at one table, her chestnut hair falling in soft waves around a face that once graced local beauty pageants. Now that face was drawn, with dark circles under her eyes and lips pressed into a thin line. Her father, Richard Wilson, a retired high school principal, sat supportively beside her, occasionally patting her hand. Across the aisle, Robert Johnson, 36, adjusted his blue tie for the 5th time that hour. His once successful construction company had been the pride of Oak Ridge, but rumors had been circulating about financial troubles. His mother, Eleanor Johnson, sat beside him. Her silver-framed glasses perched on her nose as she watched her granddaughter, little Chloe, who sat quietly with a court-appointed supervisor nearby. "Your Honor, my client has been forthcoming about all financial matters related to this separation," Robert's attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, was saying. "The assets have been fully disclosed, and Mrs. Johnson's claims of hidden valuables are unfounded and, frankly, Your Honor, seem vindictive in nature." Emily's attorney, a middle-aged woman with determined eyes, stood up. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe Mr. Johnson has been less than transparent about the couple's financial situation. My client reports several pieces of family jewelry missing from their safe, items of both monetary and sentimental value." Judge Simmons sighed. Another case of he said, she said, with no hard evidence on either side. She was about to request documentation when a small voice pierced the formal atmosphere. "I saw it!" Chloe suddenly exclaimed, her little hands raised high in the air like she was in preschool waiting to be called on. "I saw Daddy hide Mommy's sparkly things." The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert's face drained of color. Eleanor reached for her granddaughter, but the supervisor held up a hand, stopping her. Judge Simmons leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. "Bring the child forward," she commanded, her voice softening slightly. As the supervisor led Chloe to stand before the judge's bench, Eleanor whispered urgently to Robert, "What is she talking about?" "Rob, what did you do?" Robert remained frozen, his lawyer frantically scribbling notes beside him. Judge Simmons addressed the child directly. "Hello, Chloe. Do you know where you are right now?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "This is the special place where grown-ups talk about important things," she said, repeating what her mother had carefully explained to her. "That's right," Judge Simmons said. "And in this special place, it's very important to tell the truth. Do you understand what truth means?" Chloe nodded again. "Truth is real things, not pretend things." The judge smiled slightly. "Very good. Now you said you saw something. Can you tell me what you saw?" Chloe pointed directly at her father. "Daddy took Mommy's sparkly necklace and rings from their special box. Mommy was looking everywhere and crying, but I saw Daddy put them in his workshop in a different box. He locked it with a key and hid the key in his desk drawer under the papers." Emily covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Richard put his arm around his daughter, his face a mask of controlled anger. Robert seemed unable to move or speak. His attorney leaned over to whisper something, but at that moment, the courtroom doors opened. A slim woman in her late 20s with a tight ponytail and nervous eyes walked in, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest. She hesitated at the threshold, taking in the scene before her. It was Jessica Parker, Robert's administrative assistant from his construction company. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible. I have some documents Mr. Johnson requested. Judge Simmons looked up sharply. Come forward, please. Jessica walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her eyes darted between Robert and the judge. What documents do you have there? Judge Simmons asked. Jessica swallowed visibly. Business papers. Mr. Johnson asked me to... She trailed off, looking at Robert with uncertainty. To what? The judge prompted. To destroy them, Jessica finally said, her voice steadying with resolve. But I couldn't. Something felt wrong. Robert finally broke his silence. Jessica, what are you doing? His voice came out as a strangled whisper. Judge Simmons held out her hand. I'll take those papers. Jessica hesitated only a moment before handing over the portfolio. There are loan agreements in there, she said quietly. And bank statements. Things that weren't included in the financial disclosures for the divorce. Judge Simmons opened the portfolio and began reviewing the documents. With each page she turned, her expression grew more severe. After several minutes of tense silence, she looked up at Robert. Mr. Johnson, would you care to explain why these financial records weren't included in your sworn statements to this court? Robert loosened his tie, suddenly finding it difficult to breathe. Your Honor, the business has been facing some challenges. I was trying to protect your assets from your wife. Judge Simmons finished for him. No, Robert said quickly. I was trying to save the business. Everything I did was to keep things afloat until I could turn it around. By hiding assets? Emily's attorney interjected. By concealing debts and loans that put my client's financial security at risk. Judge Simmons held up a hand to silence her. According to these documents, Mr. Johnson, your construction company is on the verge of bankruptcy. You've taken out multiple high-interest loans using jointly owned property as collateral, including the family home, without your wife's knowledge or consent. Emily let out a small cry of dismay. The house? Robert, how could you? Robert couldn't meet her eyes. I was going to fix everything before anyone found out. The market just needed to turn around. Jessica stepped forward again. There's more, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson has been falsifying his signature on company documents for months. Some of the loan applications have Mrs. Johnson's signature, but she never signed them. I've worked with her on charity events. I know her handwriting. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Richard Wilson stood up, his face flushed with anger. You put my daughter and granddaughter's home at risk. You forged Emily's signature. Order, Judge Simmons called, banging her gavel. Mr. Wilson, please be seated. Eleanor Johnson was quietly weeping now, her hand covering her mouth. Robert, what were you thinking? Robert slumped in his chair. I was desperate. The company has been in trouble since the recession hit. I kept thinking if I could just land one big contract, everything would be okay. I couldn't let everyone down. The employees, the family legacy. Dad built that company from nothing. Judge Simmons was reviewing more documents. You've put not only your own financial stability at risk, but that of your soon-to-be ex-wife and your child. This changes the entire nature of these proceedings. She looked toward Chloe, who was watching the adults with wide, solemn eyes. I'm calling a court-appointed psychologist to speak with the child. In the meantime, I'm ordering a full financial investigation into Mr. Johnson's business and personal accounts. Judge Simmons turned to Jessica. Ms. Parker, I'll need a formal statement from you. And I suggest you secure legal counsel of your own. Jessica nodded, avoiding Robert's gaze. Court is in recess until tomorrow morning, Judge Simmons announced, banging her gavel. During which time, Mr. Johnson, I strongly advise you to prepare a complete and honest accounting of your finances. Mrs. Johnson will retain temporary custody of the child, with supervised visitation for Mr. Johnson, pending further evaluation. As the court began to clear, Dr. Natalie Reynolds, the court psychologist, approached Chloe. With gentle words and a warm smile, she led the little girl to a separate room designed to be child-friendly, with colorful furniture and toys. Hi, Chloe, Dr. Reynolds said as they sat on a small couch together. My name is Dr. Natalie. I'd like to talk with you a little bit, if that's okay. Chloe nodded, clutching a stuffed rabbit that the doctor had given her. Can you tell me more about what you saw with your daddy and mommy's sparkly things? Chloe's small face grew serious. I was playing hide-and-seek by myself. Daddy didn't know I was behind the curtain in his office at home. He came in with mommy's jewelry box and took out all her necklaces and rings. He put them in a metal box and locked it. Then he put the box way up high in his workshop cabinet. "Did you tell your mommy what you saw?" Chloe shook her head. "Daddy was on the phone after. He said he needed money quick and nobody could know. He said he would get it back before anyone noticed." She hugged the rabbit tighter. Daddy looked sad. "I saw him crying in his office one day when he thought no one was there." Dr. Reynolds made careful notes. "How did that make you feel, seeing your daddy sad?" "Scared," Chloe whispered. "Like when monsters might be under the bed." Outside in the hallway, Emily sat on a bench, her father beside her, as she tried to process everything that had happened. "He used the house as collateral," she said numbly. "The house my grandparents helped us buy as a wedding gift. How could he do this without telling me?" Richard squeezed her hand. "We'll figure this out, Emmy. You and Chloe can stay with me as long as you need." Across the corridor, Robert stood with his mother and his lawyer, looking shell-shocked. "You need to come clean about everything," his lawyer was saying urgently. "If there's anything else the judge might discover, now is the time to disclose it." Eleanor Johnson touched her son's arm. "Robert, I raised you better than this. Your father would be so disappointed." Robert flinched at her words. "I know, Mom, The business was everything to Dad. When things started going south, I couldn't bear to be the one who lost it all. So instead, you risked losing your family." Eleanor shook her head sadly. "You need help, Robert. Real help." As Jessica walked past them toward the exit, Robert called out to her. "Jess, wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry I put you in that position," he said, his voice breaking. "You did the right thing." Jessica finally turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "I should have spoken up sooner. When you asked me to destroy those documents, I knew something was seriously wrong. I've been watching you spiral for months, making increasingly desperate decisions." "I was trying to protect everyone," Robert said weakly. "No," Jessica replied firmly. "You were protecting yourself from facing reality. And now look what's happened." As she walked away, Robert realized with crushing clarity just how much damage his deception had caused. Not just to his marriage and his relationship with Chloe, but to everyone who had trusted him, his employees, his family, even Jessica, who had stood by him through the company's darkest days. In the child-friendly room, Dr. Reynolds was finishing her preliminary assessment of Chloe. The little girl showed signs of stress and hypervigilance typical of children in high-conflict divorces, but she was remarkably resilient and articulate for her age. "Chloe, you've been very brave today," Dr. Reynolds told her. "Thank you for telling the truth, even though it was hard." Chloe looked up at her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to understand far more than a 3-year-old should. "Will Daddy be in trouble now?" Dr. Reynolds chose her words carefully. "Your daddy has some grown-up problems he needs to fix, but both your mommy and daddy love you very much. And that won't change." As the sun began to set over Oak Ridge County, casting long shadows through the courthouse windows, the Johnson family found themselves at a crossroads, one that would require truth, accountability, and perhaps eventually forgiveness to navigate. The morning after the courthouse revelation, Emily Johnson sat at her father's kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Chloe was still asleep upstairs in the guest bedroom, surrounded by the few toys and clothes Emily had hastily packed the night before. The weight of yesterday's discoveries pressed down on her shoulders like physical pain. "You need to eat something," Richard Wilson said, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of his daughter. At 62, Richard maintained the authoritative presence that had served him well during his 30 years as a high school principal. Retirement hadn't softened him much, but his eyes held a tenderness reserved only for Emily and Chloe. "I'm not hungry, Dad." Emily pushed the plate away gently. "I keep thinking about all those times Robert was working late, all those business trips. The constant stress, he claimed, was just about landing the next big contract." She looked up at her father, eyes glistening. "How could I have been so blind?" Richard sat down across from her. "This isn't your fault, Emmy. Robert deliberately kept you in the dark. But I should have known. The signs were there. He became secretive about finances, started handling all the bills himself, got nervous whenever I mentioned the jewelry my mother left me." Emily's voice caught. "Mom's jewelry, Dad. The last connection I had to her, and he was going to pawn it without even telling me." Richard reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "We'll get them back. Judge Simmons will make sure of it." Emily's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her best friend, Tanya. "Just heard what happened. Coming over with breakfast and moral support. No arguments." Emily smiled faintly. Tanya had been her rock ever since they met in college. She texted back a simple thank you and returned to her thoughts. Across town in the modest apartment he'd rented after moving out of the family home 3 months earlier, Robert Johnson hadn't slept. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, surrounded by financial documents spread across the rumpled sheets. His lawyer had been clear. He needed to account for every penny, every loan, every asset before today's court appearance. The buzzing of his phone startled him. It was his mother. "I'm outside your door," Eleanor Johnson's text read. "Open up." Robert sighed and went to let her in. Eleanor Johnson had always been a force of nature, petite in stature but commanding in presence. At 70, her hair was fully silver, styled in a practical bob that framed a face lined with experience but still beautiful. She entered carrying grocery bags. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting, heading straight for his kitchenette. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" "Mom, I don't have time for breakfast. I have to be in court in 2 hours with a complete financial disclosure." Eleanor began unpacking eggs and bread. "You'll think more clearly with food in your stomach. Sit." Too exhausted to argue, Robert slumped into a chair at the small table. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. Eleanor paused in her breakfast preparations. "How bad is what exactly?" "The damage. To the family. To Chloe." His voice cracked on his daughter's name. Eleanor turned to face her son, her expression a complex mixture of disappointment and concern. "You've created quite a mess, Robert. Emily is devastated. Chloe is confused. She hesitated. "I'm trying to understand how my son became someone who would forge his wife's signature and hide assets during a divorce." Robert flinched. "I didn't start out planning to deceive anyone, Mum. When the Patterson development deal fell through last year, it was like watching dominoes fall. We lost the biggest contract we'd ever had. Suppliers still needed to be paid, and the bank wouldn't extend our line of credit. So you started borrowing from loan sharks?" Eleanor's voice was sharp. "They weren't loan sharks. They were private investors. High interest, yes, but legitimate." Robert ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I thought it would be temporary, just enough to keep the business afloat until the market improved. And Emily's jewelry, putting up your home as collateral without her knowledge." Robert couldn't meet his mother's eyes. "I was desperate. Every month that passed, we sank deeper. I convinced myself I was protecting her from worry, that I'd replace the jewelry before she noticed, that I'd pay off the loans before they became a problem." Eleanor cracked eggs into a bowl with more force than necessary. "Your father built that company on honesty and hard work. Even in the worst recession of his time, he never lied to me about our finances." The mention of his father struck Robert like a physical blow. Frank Johnson had been a legend in Oak Ridge, a self-made man who started with a single truck and built one of the most respected construction companies in the county. When he passed away 4 years ago, Robert had inherited not just the business but the weight of its legacy. "I couldn't be the one to let it all collapse. Mom, Dad's life's work." "Don't you dare use your father as an excuse," Eleanor interrupted, pointing a spatula at him. "Frank would never have approved of deception, especially toward family." As Eleanor turned back to the stove, Robert's phone rang. It was Jessica Parker. "Robert," she said when he answered, her voice tense, "I've just been served with a subpoena to testify about the company finances. They're asking for all the records I have access to." Robert closed his eyes. "Just tell the truth, Jess, it's all coming out anyway." After ending the call, he looked up to find his mother watching him. Her expression softened somewhat. "Jessica is a good person," Eleanor said. "She put her own job at risk to do the right thing." "I know," Robert replied. "Everyone around me has been paying for my mistakes." Eleanor set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Eat, then shower and put on your best suit. You're going to walk into that courtroom today and take full responsibility for your actions. No excuses, no shifting blame. If you want any chance at rebuilding trust with your daughter, with any of us, that's where it starts." At Richard Wilson's home, Tanya had arrived with bagels, cream cheese, and fierce loyalty. She hugged Emily tightly before setting down her offerings. All right, what do you need? A shoulder to cry on? Someone to help you plan your next steps? Or should I just go key Robert's car? Tanya's attempt at humor brought a small smile to Emily's face. Thanks for coming, Emily said, accepting a bagel. I'm still in shock, I think. Yesterday morning I was just worried about getting through another divorce hearing. By afternoon I discovered my soon-to-be ex-husband has nearly bankrupted us, forged my signature and hidden my mother's jewelry. Tanya shook her head in disbelief. Have you spoken to your attorney? She called last night. With the new evidence, she thinks we can expedite the divorce and secure full custody of Chloe, at least temporarily. Richard entered the kitchen. Tanya, good to see you. Is that cinnamon raisin I smell? As they ate, the conversation turned to practical matters, finding a permanent place for Emily and Chloe to live, understanding the implications of Robert's financial deceptions for Emily's own credit, and preparing Chloe for the changes ahead. Mommy? A small voice called from the doorway. Chloe stood there in her pink pajamas, her honey-blonde hair tousled from sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Emily immediately went to her daughter, kneeling to embrace her. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay in Grandpa's house? Chloe nodded, then asked the question Emily had been dreading. Are we going to see Daddy today? Emily exchanged a glance with her father before answering carefully. Yes, we'll see Daddy at the special place again today. But after that, you and I are going to stay here with Grandpa for a while. Because Daddy hid your sparkly things? Emily took a deep breath. Partly. Daddy and I have some grown-up problems to work out. Chloe seemed to consider this, her small face serious. Daddy looked sad when I told about the sparkly things. Was I bad for telling? Emily's heart constricted. Oh, Chloe, you were very brave and good for telling the truth. Even when the truth is hard or makes people sad, it's still important. Tanya approached with a bagel smeared with Chloe's favorite strawberry cream cheese. Hey, Pumpkin, hungry for breakfast? Chloe's face brightened at the sight of Tanya, her honorary aunt. She accepted the bagel and allowed herself to be led to the table, momentarily distracted from the weightier matters. Emily watched her daughter, a mix of emotions churning inside her. Anger at Robert for putting them in this position, fear about their financial future, and a deep, gnawing worry about how all of this would affect Chloe's relationship with her father. At the courthouse later that morning, the atmosphere was tense. Jessica Parker sat on a bench outside the courtroom, nervously reviewing documents with her hastily hired attorney. When she saw Emily approach with Chloe, she stood up, uncertainty written across her face. Emily, she called softly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have come forward sooner. Emily studied the younger woman. Jessica had worked for Johnson Construction for 3 years, hired fresh out of college. Emily had always liked her, appreciating her efficiency at the few company events they'd both attended. You came forward when it mattered, Emily finally said. That took courage. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. There's something else you should know. After yesterday's hearing, I went back to the office and gathered more documents, things Robert had told me to keep separate from the regular accounts. I've given everything to my lawyer. Emily felt a chill. How bad is it? Jessica glanced at Chloe, who was distracted by a colorful mural on the courthouse wall. The company isn't just in trouble, Emily. It's been insolvent for months. Robert has been shuffling money around, taking new loans to pay old ones, using company funds for personal expenses to maintain appearances. The house? Emily asked, her voice barely audible. There are 3 mortgages on it now, Jessica confirmed. And the jewelry? He didn't just hide it. According to the records, he used it as collateral for a private loan about 2 months ago. Emily closed her eyes, absorbing this new blow. Her mother's jewelry, the diamond earrings she'd worn on her wedding day, the sapphire pendant that had been in the family for generations, might already be lost. Ms. Parker, Jessica's lawyer approached. The judge is ready for your deposition. Jessica touched Emily's arm lightly. I'll tell them everything I know. I promise. As Jessica disappeared into a side room, Emily felt a tugging on her skirt. Chloe was looking up at her with wide, perceptive eyes. Mommy, why are you sad again? Emily knelt down, forcing a smile. Just grown-up worries, sweetheart. Nothing for you to be concerned about. Dr. Reynolds appeared in the hallway. Hi, Chloe! Would you like to come play in the special room while the grown-ups talk? Chloe looked between her mother and the psychologist, then nodded. Can I bring Mr. Hoppy? She asked, holding up her stuffed rabbit. Of course, Dr. Reynolds smiled. Mr. Hoppy is very welcome. As Dr. Reynolds led Chloe away, Robert arrived with his mother and his lawyer. He looked haggard but composed in a dark blue suit. When he saw Emily, he hesitated, then approached cautiously. Emily, he began, his voice low, before we go in there, I need to tell you. Save it for the judge, Robert, Emily cut him off, her voice cold. Jessica already told me about the additional mortgages and the loan against my mother's jewelry. Robert blanched. I was going to tell you that I've instructed my lawyer to be completely transparent today. No more hiding, no more deception. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get your jewelry back. Emily looked at the man she had once loved enough to marry, to have a child with, to build a life around. Now he seemed like a stranger. You know what hurts the most, Robert? It's not the money or even the jewelry. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth when things started going wrong. We could have faced it together, found a solution together. Eleanor stepped forward. Emily, I know my son has wronged you terribly, but I hope, for Chloe's sake, that someday there might be forgiveness. Emily's gaze shifted to her mother-in-law, softening slightly. Eleanor had always been kind to her, treating her like the daughter she never had. Chloe needs her father, Emily acknowledged. But she needs a father who's honest with her, who shows her what integrity looks like. I don't know if Robert can be that man. Before Robert could respond, they were called into the courtroom. As they took their places, Judge Simmons entered, her expression grave. Based on the additional evidence that has come to light and Ms. Parker's testimony, the judge began, I'm ordering a comprehensive forensic accounting of both Mr. Johnson's business and the couple's personal finances. In the meantime, Mrs. Johnson will retain sole custody of the minor child, with Mr. Johnson permitted supervised visitation twice weekly. Judge Simmons turned her attention directly to Robert. Mr. Johnson, I am deeply troubled by the extent of financial impropriety revealed in these proceedings. You have abused the trust of not only your wife, but this court. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of possible fraud charges related to the forgery of Mrs. Johnson's signature. Robert paled visibly. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but Judge Simmons wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am issuing an emergency order freezing all assets belonging to either party or to Johnson Construction until a full accounting can be completed. Mrs. Johnson will receive temporary support for herself and the child from a court-monitored account. The judge's gaze swept over both parties. Let me be very clear. The well-being of the child is my primary concern. I expect both parents to shield her from the legal and financial complications to the greatest extent possible. Dr. Reynolds will continue working with Chloe and will provide recommendations regarding the family's ongoing psychological needs. As the judge outlined further details of her ruling, Emily felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. The truth was finally coming to light, but at what cost to their daughter? Across the aisle, Robert sat with his head bowed, the weight of his deceptions finally crushing down upon him. Outside the courtroom after the hearing, Dr. Reynolds approached Emily. Chloe is asking for both of her parents. Would you be willing to speak with her together? Just for a few minutes in my presence. Emily hesitated, looking at Robert, who stood a few feet away, conferring with his lawyer. It might help her make sense of what's happening, Dr. Reynolds added gently. With a reluctant nod, Emily agreed. As they followed Dr. Reynolds to her office, she and Robert walked side by side in silence, the gulf between them wider than the few inches of physical space they maintained. In the child-friendly room, Chloe sat drawing a picture. When she saw both her parents enter together, her face lit up with hope that broke Emily's heart. "Mommy, Daddy!" She ran to them, wrapping one arm around each of their legs. For just a moment, as they both knelt to embrace their daughter, Emily caught Robert's eye over Chloe's head. In that fleeting connection, she saw not the man who had deceived her, but the father who loved their child as much as she did. It was the first crack in the wall of anger she had built around her heart, a tiny fissure that suggested that perhaps someday healing might be possible. The weeks following the courthouse revelations unfolded in a blur of legal meetings, financial discoveries, and emotional adjustments. For Emily, each day brought a new challenge, explaining to Chloe why they were still living at Grandpa's house, meeting with her attorney to discuss the mounting evidence of Robert's financial deceptions, and trying to piece together some semblance of normalcy for her daughter's sake. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Emily sat across from her attorney, Diane Myers, in a downtown office overlooking Oak Ridge's modest skyline. Rain streaked down the windows, mirroring the tears Emily had shed in private over the past few weeks. "The forensic accountant's preliminary report is in," Diane said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. "It's not good, Emily. Robert's company has been technically insolvent for nearly a year. He's been taking increasingly desperate measures to keep it afloat." Emily flipped through the report, most of the financial terminology beyond her understanding. "What does this mean for Chloe and me?" Diane sighed, removing her reading glasses. "The marital assets are significantly depleted. The house has multiple liens against it. Most of your joint savings were funneled into the business. The good news, if we can call it that, is that the court recognizes you were an unwitting victim in this." "And my mother's jewelry." Diane's expression softened. "We've located it. Robert did use it as collateral for a private loan, but we've convinced the lender to surrender it to the court, pending resolution of the divorce proceedings. You should have it back soon." Emily closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her. Those pieces weren't just valuable. They were irreplaceable connections to her mother, who had passed away when Emily was in college. "What about Robert? Is he really facing fraud charges?" "The DA is reviewing the case. The forgery of your signature on loan documents is particularly problematic." Diane hesitated. "There is one development you should know about. Robert has voluntarily surrendered most of his personal assets to the court. His lawyer says he's trying to make amends." Emily's emotions twisted into a complex knot. Part of her wanted Robert to face consequences for his actions, yet another part, the part that remembered the man she'd once loved, felt a pang of empathy for his downfall. "Has he found a job?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "Not yet, as far as I know. Johnson Construction is in receivership. Most of the employees, including Jessica Parker, have been let go." Diane gathered her papers. "The court-ordered support payments will continue, though they're modest. Judge Simmons is adamant that Chloe's needs come first." Later that afternoon, Emily picked up Chloe from her new preschool, a change necessitated by their move to Richard's neighborhood. The little girl's face brightened when she saw her mother waiting. "Mommy, I painted a picture for Daddy. Can we take it to him today? It's his special day." Emily's heart sank. In the chaos of the past weeks, she'd completely forgotten that today was Robert's birthday. For the past 3 years, she and Chloe had made a tradition of baking his favorite lemon cake and decorating the house with balloons. "Sweetie, we can't see Daddy today except for the regular visit tomorrow," Emily explained gently. "But we can give him your picture then." Chloe's face fell. "But it's his birthday. He'll be sad if we don't have cake." Emily knelt down to her daughter's level. "Tell you what, we can make a card for him tonight to go with your picture. How does that sound?" Chloe nodded reluctantly, unconvinced but accepting the compromise. As they drove to Richard's house, Emily's mind raced. She had no obligation to acknowledge Robert's birthday, especially after everything he'd done. Yet seeing Chloe's disappointment made her reconsider. Would it hurt to allow a small kindness for Chloe's sake? At home, Richard was preparing dinner. The smell of his famous pot roast filled the house, comfort food that had always been Emily's favorite growing up. "How was the meeting with Diane?" he asked as Emily helped Chloe hang up her raincoat. "Enlightening," Emily replied, careful with her words in front of Chloe. "We'll talk after dinner." As Chloe settled at the kitchen table with crayons to make her father's birthday card, Emily pulled her father aside. "Today is Robert's birthday," she whispered. "Chloe remembered and wants to bring him cake. Part of me thinks it's ridiculous to celebrate anything about him right now, but—" Richard studied his daughter's face. "But you're wondering if a small gesture might help Chloe feel like her world isn't completely upside down?" Emily nodded, grateful for her father's understanding. "Emmy, I think you know the answer already. Whatever Robert has done, he's still Chloe's father. Letting her acknowledge his birthday isn't about forgiving him. It's about letting her express her love in a way she understands." Emily sighed. When did you get so wise about co-parenting, Dad? Richard smiled sadly. I watched your mother navigate it with your stepfather. It wasn't always pretty, but she always put you first. He glanced at Chloe happily drawing at the table. Besides, that little one has the biggest heart I've ever seen. Don't make her choose between loving you and loving her father. After dinner, Emily surprised herself by suggesting they bake cupcakes for Robert. Chloe's delight was worth any lingering resentment Emily felt. As they mixed batter and applied frosting, Emily realized it was the first time in weeks she'd seen her daughter truly happy. Across town, Robert sat alone in his sparse apartment. His mother had invited him to dinner, but he'd declined, preferring to spend his birthday in solitude, reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few weeks. The company his father had built was gone, most of its assets liquidated to pay creditors. Former employees, people who had trusted him with their livelihoods, were now scrambling for new jobs in a tight market. His marriage was over, his reputation in Oak Ridge ruined, and his relationship with his daughter reduced to 2 supervised visits per week. A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found Jessica Parker standing in the hallway looking uncertain. Jessica, what are you doing here? She held up a small paper bag. I brought you something. Happy birthday, Robert. Stunned, he stepped back to let her in. How did you remember? 3 years of scheduling your calendar makes some dates stick. She placed the bag on his kitchen counter and extracted a cupcake with a single candle. It's not much, but Robert was touched by the unexpected kindness, especially from someone who had every reason to resent him. Thank you, really. Jessica glanced around the nearly empty apartment. The furniture was minimal. Just a couch, a small table with 2 chairs and a TV sitting on a cardboard box. How are you holding up? Robert shrugged. About as well as can be expected. I've been applying for jobs, but it turns out a failed business owner with pending fraud investigations isn't in high demand. I found something, Jessica offered. Assistant office manager at Davidson Manufacturing. Not exactly a career pinnacle, but it pays the bills. That's great, Jess. I'm happy for you. Robert meant it sincerely. Have you heard from any of the others? Most have landed on their feet. Mike and Tony started their own small contracting business. She hesitated. They might need help, actually. Not in management, but... Robert raised an eyebrow. They'd consider hiring the guy who tanked their last job? You know carpentry better than anyone. Before you took over the business side of things, you were the best foreman Johnson Construction had. Jessica's voice softened. People haven't forgotten that, Robert. The idea of returning to hands-on work, of creating rather than managing, stirred something in Robert that he hadn't felt in years. Before the pressure of running the company had consumed him, he'd actually enjoyed the craft of building. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock. Robert opened the door to find Emily and Chloe standing there, Chloe clutching a decorated shoebox and Emily holding a small container of cupcakes. Happy birthday, Daddy, Chloe exclaimed, rushing forward to hug his legs. Robert looked from his daughter to Emily, confusion and gratitude battling in his expression. I didn't expect... Thank you for bringing her. Emily's face remained carefully neutral. It was important to Chloe. Jessica stepped forward. I should go. Thanks for the talk, Robert. As Jessica slipped past Emily with a nod, Chloe proudly presented her shoebox. We made you presents, Daddy. Robert knelt down to accept the gift, opening it to find a colorful handmade card, a painting of what appeared to be their family, though the figures were now separated on the page, and a clay sculpture that Chloe explained was a house for when you get a bigger place. These are the best presents I've ever received, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked up at Emily, who remained by the door. Thank you for this. Emily nodded slightly. 15 minutes, Chloe. Then we need to get home for bath time. As Chloe showed Robert her latest preschool adventures, Emily surveyed the apartment. It was a far cry from their spacious family home, with its custom kitchen that Robert had designed himself. The contrast between his former life and current circumstances was stark. You're looking for work? Emily asked, noticing a resume draft on the table. Robert nodded, keeping his attention on Chloe's animated story about a classroom turtle. A few leads. Nothing concrete yet. Emily didn't press further, After Chloe had finished her story, and they'd shared cupcakes, Emily gently reminded her daughter it was time to leave. "Can't I stay a little longer?" "Please, Mommy." Chloe's pleading eyes were difficult to resist. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Remember, you'll see Daddy tomorrow for your regular visit." As they prepared to leave, Robert walked them to the door. "Emily," he said quietly, "I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know I'm working with the bank to try to save the house. If there's any way to keep it for you and Chloe." "Don't make promises you can't keep, Robert," Emily cut him off, her voice low so Chloe wouldn't hear. "We're adapting to our new reality. You should do the same." The following day, during their regular supervised visit at the family center, Dr. Reynolds observed Robert and Chloe together. Despite his personal troubles, Robert remained fully engaged with his daughter, building block towers, reading her favorite stories, and listening intently to her chatter. After the visit, Dr. Reynolds asked to speak with Robert privately. "You're very natural with Chloe," she noted. "She clearly adores you." Robert smiled sadly. "She's the best thing in my life. Always has been." "How are you processing everything that's happened?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "Emotionally, I mean." Robert was silent for a moment. "I'm seeing a therapist, if that's what you're asking. Court mandated, but I would have sought help anyway. I need to understand how I let things go so far, how I became someone who could lie to his family." "And have you gained any insights?" "Some," Robert admitted. "My therapist thinks I've been trying to live up to an impossible standard since my father passed. Dad built the company from nothing, weathered multiple recessions without ever compromising his principles. When things started going wrong on my watch, I couldn't face the failure. I kept thinking I could fix it before anyone found out." "That must have been an enormous burden to carry alone," Dr. Reynolds observed. "It was. But that doesn't excuse what I did." Robert looked down at his hands. "The hardest part now is knowing I can't just make it right. I can apologize, I can try to be better, but the damage is done." Dr. Reynolds made a note in her file. "Recognizing that is an important step, Robert. Have you shared any of these realizations with Emily?" "She's not interested in hearing from me, except about practical matters involving Chloe." There was no bitterness in his voice, just resignation. "And I don't blame her." Later that week, Emily received an unexpected call from Eleanor Johnson. "Emily, dear, I was hoping we might have lunch tomorrow," Robert's mother said. "Just the two of us. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you." Curious and a bit apprehensive, Emily agreed. They met at a small cafe in downtown Oak Ridge, a neutral territory away from family homes and painful memories. Eleanor looked elegant as always, but Emily noticed new lines of worry on her face. After they ordered, Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "The court released this to me yesterday," she said, sliding it across the table. "Robert asked me to give it to you right away." Emily opened the pouch to find her mother's sapphire pendant, the most precious piece from the collection Robert had hidden and used as collateral. "He went to the lender personally and paid off enough of the loan to secure its release," Eleanor explained. "He's working at his old friend Mike's construction company now, doing physical labor for the first time in years. Every penny beyond his basic living expenses is going toward making things right." Emily ran her finger over the familiar blue stone. "I didn't know he'd found work." "He didn't want you to know. He was afraid you'd think he was trying to earn points with the judge." Eleanor sipped her tea. "Emily, I'm not here to defend what my son did. It was wrong on every level. But I want you to know he's genuinely trying to change." Emily secured the pendant back in its pouch. "For Chloe's sake, I'm glad to hear that. But it doesn't change our situation." "Of course not," Eleanor agreed. "The divorce will proceed as it should. I'm only hoping that perhaps over time, you might find a way to co-parent that allows Chloe to have both of you fully in her life." Emily studied her mother-in-law's face. Despite everything, she had always respected Eleanor's directness and integrity. "I'm working with Dr. Reynolds on that. Chloe deserves a relationship with her father, regardless of my feelings toward him." Eleanor nodded, relief evident in her expression. "That's all I can ask." She hesitated, then added, "I've also started therapy myself. I'm trying to understand if there were ways I enabled Robert's behavior, if I somehow taught him that appearances mattered more than honesty." This vulnerability from the typically stoic Eleanor surprised Emily. We all played a part in creating the environment where Robert felt he couldn't be honest about the business problems. The pressure to maintain the Johnson Construction legacy was immense. As their food arrived, the conversation shifted to Chloe, her adjustment to preschool, her resilience in the face of change. For a brief time, they were just a grandmother and mother sharing stories about a beloved child. The complicated adult dynamics temporarily set aside. When lunch ended, Eleanor embraced Emily before they parted. "Thank you for still allowing me to be in Chloe's life. It means more than I can express." Emily returned to her father's house with the sapphire pendant and a sense that beneath the rubble of her collapsed marriage, the foundation for a different kind of family structure might eventually emerge. That evening, as she helped Chloe prepare for bed, the little girl asked a question that caught Emily off guard. "Mommy, is Daddy a bad person because he hid your sparkly things?" Emily sat on the edge of Chloe's bed, considering how to respond. The easy answer would be to paint Robert as a villain or to dismiss the question entirely. But she remembered Dr. Reynolds' advice about honest, age-appropriate communication. "No, sweetheart, Daddy isn't a bad person. He made some bad choices because he was scared and didn't know what else to do." But making bad choices doesn't make someone a bad person. Chloe seemed to consider this carefully. "Like when I took an extra cookie without asking. That was a bad choice, but you still loved me." Emily smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "Exactly like that, except grown-up problems are bigger than cookies. Is Daddy still scared?" The innocent question pierced Emily's heart. "I think Daddy is working very hard to be brave now, to fix his mistakes and to be the best father he can be for you." Chloe nodded, satisfied with this answer. "I told him not to be scared. I said we all make mistakes and saying sorry helps make it better." Emily blinked back unexpected tears. "That was very wise of you, Chloe." As her daughter drifted off to sleep, Emily sat in the darkened room, the sapphire pendant now around her neck. She touched it gently, thinking of her mother, of the woman she herself was trying to be for Chloe, and of the broken family they were all attempting to reassemble into something new, something that might, with time and effort, become whole in a different way. 3 months after the courthouse revelation, autumn painted Oakridge in shades of amber and crimson. Emily stood in the kitchen of her father's house, reviewing a stack of apartment listings, while Chloe sat at the table coloring. Though Richard had insisted they could stay as long as needed, Emily felt it was time to establish their own space, a new home where she and Chloe could begin to build their future. "What about this one?" Emily murmured to herself, circling a 2-bedroom apartment near Chloe's preschool. The rent was within her budget, barely. After years as a part-time event coordinator, Emily had recently accepted a full-time position at Oakridge Community Center, organizing local functions and managing their social media presence. The job offered stability and benefits, if not luxury. "Emmy, there's someone at the door for you," Richard called from the living room. "It's Jessica Parker." Emily looked up in surprise. She hadn't seen Robert's former assistant since the day of his birthday nearly 2 months ago. Setting down her pen, she went to greet the visitor. Jessica stood in the foyer, looking more confident than Emily remembered, dressed in a professional blazer and carrying a sleek leather portfolio. "Emily, thank you for seeing me." "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Would you like some coffee?" As they settled in the kitchen, Chloe looked up from her coloring. "Hi, Miss Jessica. Are you here to see Grandpa? He's making birdhouses in the garage." Jessica smiled at the child. "Actually, I came to talk to your mom, but I'd love to see those birdhouses later, if that's okay." Satisfied, Chloe returned to her artwork, humming softly to herself. "So, what brings you here?" Emily asked, setting a mug of coffee in front of Jessica. Jessica opened her portfolio. "I've started a new venture. After everything that happened with Johnson Construction, I realized there was a gap in the market for someone who understands both business administration and the construction industry." She slid a business card across the table. "Parker Business Solutions. I'm offering consulting services to small construction firms, helping them with financial management, contract preparation, permit navigation, that sort of thing." "That's impressive," Emily said sincerely, "but I'm not sure how I can help. I heard through Eleanor that you're working at the community center now. I was hoping you might consider referring me to local contractors who host events there or do renovation work for the center. And, Jessica hesitated, I was also hoping to ask your advice on something more personal. Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. I'm launching a women's financial literacy program, free workshops for women going through divorce, career transitions, or anyone who suddenly finds themselves needing to understand finances they previously delegated to someone else. Jessica's eyes were earnest. Your experience made me realize how vulnerable women can be when they're kept in the dark about financial matters. I'd like to help prevent that from happening to others. Emily was silent for a moment, processing the unexpected proposal. Why me? After everything that happened? Because you handled an impossible situation with remarkable grace, Jessica said simply. You didn't fall apart or become bitter. You focused on protecting Chloe and rebuilding your life. That's exactly the spirit I want to bring to these workshops. Practical resilience, not victimhood. A warm feeling of validation spread through Emily's chest. In the chaos of the past months, she'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she hadn't fully appreciated her own strength. I'm not a financial expert, she cautioned, but you're an expert in starting over, in asking the right questions. In not being afraid to face hard truths, Jessica leaned forward. I can bring in accountants and financial advisors for the technical aspects. What I need is someone who can connect with these women on a human level. Emily glanced at Chloe, who had abandoned her coloring and was now attempting to build a tower with colored pencils. I'd need to check my schedule. Between work and Chloe and the ongoing legal proceedings. Of course, Jessica said quickly. The program won't launch until after the new year. Take some time to think about it. As they continued discussing the details, Chloe's pencil tower collapsed with a clatter. Oops, I need more pencils to make it stronger, she declared, heading to the living room in search of supplies. She seems to be adjusting well, Jessica observed. Emily nodded. Children are resilient. Dr. Reynolds says Chloe's ability to process what's happening is remarkable for her age. She sipped her coffee. How is Robert doing? I only see him during the custody exchanges, and we keep conversation to a minimum. Jessica's expression softened. He's working hard. Mike and Tony have him doing actual carpentry again, custom cabinetry mostly. He seems lighter somehow, despite everything. More like the Robert I first met when I joined the company, before the financial pressure consumed him. Emily wasn't sure how to feel about this information. Part of her was glad for Chloe's sake that Robert was finding his footing. Another part, a part she wasn't entirely proud of, felt a twinge of resentment that he could find any happiness amid the wreckage he'd created. He's still meeting with his therapist twice a week, Jessica added, and he's joined a support group for divorced fathers. Eleanor practically dragged him to the first meeting, but now he goes willingly. Before Emily could respond, the front door opened, and Tanya breezed in carrying grocery bags. Emergency ice cream delivery. Oh, she stopped short at the sight of Jessica. Sorry, I didn't know you had company. Emily made introductions, explaining Jessica's new business venture. Tanya's initial wariness, she had been firmly Team Emily throughout the divorce, gradually thawed as Jessica outlined her financial literacy program. Actually, this is perfect timing, Tanya said, unpacking pints of ice cream into the freezer. I'm organizing a women's professional network through the Chamber of Commerce. Your workshops would be an excellent addition to our resource offerings. As the three women began brainstorming potential collaborations, Emily felt a strange sense of possibility opening before her. From the painful implosion of her marriage, new connections and opportunities were emerging. Perhaps the foundation of her new life would be stronger than she'd dared to hope. Later that evening, after Jessica and Tanya had departed with plans to meet again the following week, Emily sat on the porch swing with her father, watching as Chloe played in the yard with the neighbor's friendly golden retriever. Jessica seems to have landed on her feet, Richard commented, sipping his after-dinner tea. She has, Emily agreed. It's strange. In some ways, the collapse of Johnson Construction freed her to pursue her own path. She was always too talented to remain just Robert's assistant. Richard studied his daughter's face. And what about you, Emmy? Have you given more thought to what you want for your own future? Emily sighed, leaning back against the swing. One day at a time, Dad. Right now, finding an apartment and getting Chloe settled is my priority. and the financial literacy program. Will you do it? I'm considering it. The idea of helping other women avoid what I went through is appealing. Emily watched as Chloe threw a tennis ball for the dog. But it would mean interacting with Robert's world again, even indirectly. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Richard was silent for a moment. You know, after your mother left, I was angry for a long time. I wanted nothing to do with anything that reminded me of her. But eventually I realized that approach was limiting my own growth. He patted Emily's hand. Just something to consider. The following Saturday was Robert's scheduled time with Chloe. As had become their routine, Emily drove to the family center where their supervised visits took place. Usually she would drop Chloe off with the supervisor and return 2 hours later. This time, however, Dr. Reynolds had requested that both parents stay for a joint session. Emily arrived to find Robert already there, talking with Dr. Reynolds in the center's small reception area. He looked different, leaner, his hands roughened from physical work, his designer clothes replaced by more practical attire. When Chloe spotted him, she broke free from Emily's hand and ran to him. "Daddy, look, I lost a tooth." She grinned widely, displaying the new gap in her smile. Robert knelt down, his face lighting up. "Wow, that's a big milestone. Did the tooth fairy visit?" "Uh-huh. She left me $2 and a note that said I was brave." As Robert chatted with Chloe about this important development, Emily greeted Dr. Reynolds. "You wanted to see us both?" Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Let's go to my office while Chloe plays with Ms. Karen for a few minutes." Once they were settled in the psychologist's comfortable office, Dr. Reynolds addressed them both. "I've been working with Chloe for 3 months now, and I'm pleased with her progress. She's displaying remarkable resilience and emotional intelligence for a child her age." "That's good news," Emily said, relief evident in her voice. "It is," Dr. Reynolds agreed. "Based on my observations and Chloe's continued well-being, I believe we can begin transitioning to unsupervised visitation for Robert." Emily tensed. "Already? But the court ordered—" "The court follows my recommendations in these matters," Dr. Reynolds explained gently. "And my professional assessment is that Chloe would benefit from more natural interactions with her father at this stage." Robert, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "I understand Emily's concerns. I betrayed her trust completely, but I would never do anything to harm Chloe." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Robert has been consistent in his therapy, Emily. He's made significant progress in understanding the patterns that led to his deception, and most importantly, his interactions with Chloe have been consistently positive and appropriate." Emily studied her hands, conflicting emotions churning inside her. The logical part of her recognized that Chloe needed her father. The wounded part wasn't ready to trust Robert with anything, let alone their precious daughter. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she finally asked. "A graduated approach," Dr. Reynolds replied, "starting with a few hours of unsupervised time, perhaps at a public place like the park or children's museum. If that goes well, we could progress to longer visits, eventually including time at Robert's apartment." Robert spoke carefully, as if measuring each word. "Emily, I know I have no right to ask for your trust, but I'm asking you to trust Dr. Reynolds' assessment. Chloe deserves as normal a relationship with both of us as possible." Emily looked at him directly for the first time in months. Behind the remorse in his eyes, she saw something else, a steadiness that had been absent during the turbulent final years of their marriage. "If we do this," she said slowly, "there would need to be clear boundaries. Chloe's routine has finally stabilized. I don't want anything disrupting that." "Of course," Robert agreed quickly. "Whatever parameters you think are appropriate." Dr. Reynolds smiled encouragingly. "That's exactly the kind of co-parenting communication I've been hoping to hear from you both. Shall we bring Chloe in now and discuss how we'll present this to her?" The following weekend brought the first unsupervised visit. Robert had suggested the Children's Discovery Museum, neutral territory that Chloe loved. As Emily prepared her daughter for the outing, she worked to keep her own anxiety hidden. "Remember, Daddy will bring you back to Grandpa's house at 4 o'clock, she explained, zipping up Chloe's light jacket. "You have my phone number in your backpack if you need me." Chloe, excited about the museum, was barely listening. "Can I show Daddy the bubble room and the dinosaur bones?" "Of course, sweetheart. You can show him everything." Emily straightened, hearing Robert's car pull into the driveway. That's Daddy now. Got your backpack? As they walked to the door, Chloe skipping ahead, Richard emerged from his study. Everything okay, Emmy? Emily nodded, though her stomach was in knots. Just the first solo visit. I'm fine. Richard said, unconvinced. Well, I thought I might take my daughter out for lunch while my granddaughter is having her adventure. The new bistro downtown has those salads you like. Emily smiled gratefully at her father. He always knew when she needed distraction. Opening the front door, Emily found Robert waiting on the porch, hands in his pockets. He'd gotten a haircut, she noticed absently, and looked more like his old self, except for a new weathered quality to his face, a humility in his posture that spoke of hard-earned lessons. Hi, Robert, she greeted him formally. She's all ready to go. There's a water bottle and snack in her backpack. Thanks, he replied, his eyes warming as Chloe bounded toward him. Hey, princess, ready for our museum adventure? Daddy! I'm going to show you the bubble room and the dinosaurs and the water table and... Robert laughed, scooping her up. Whoa, sounds like we have a full agenda. Over Chloe's head, he met Emily's gaze. We'll be back by 4, exactly as planned. Emily nodded, fighting the urge to issue last-minute instructions or warnings. Have fun, Chloe. I'll see you this afternoon. As she watched them drive away, Emily was surprised by the conflicting emotions washing over her. Relief at having a few hours to herself, anxiety about Chloe being without her, and something unexpected, a flicker of memory from happier times when the three of them had been a family, before secrets and lies had corroded their foundation. Richard appeared beside her, car keys in hand. They'll be fine, Emmy, and so will you. Now, how about that lunch? Throughout lunch, Emily checked her phone frequently, half expecting an emergency call. But none came. Instead, shortly after 2 o'clock, she received a text message from Robert, a photo of Chloe standing inside a giant bubble in the museum's bubble room, her face alight with wonder. The caption read simply, having a blast. All is well. Emily showed the phone to her father. He didn't have to do that. No, he didn't, Richard agreed. But it was thoughtful. He knows you're worried. By the time 4 o'clock arrived, Emily had managed to relax somewhat, helped by her father's steady conversation and the wine they'd shared with lunch. She was reading on the porch when Robert's car pulled into the driveway right on schedule. Chloe bounded out, clutching a small gift bag from the museum shop and talking excitedly. Mommy? The museum had a new exhibit with light-up floors that change when you walk on them. And Daddy let me get a geode from the gift shop, and we're going to break it open next time to see the crystals inside. Emily smiled, absorbing her daughter's enthusiasm. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you go show Grandpa your geode while I talk to Daddy for a minute? As Chloe dashed inside, Emily turned to Robert. Thank you for the photo. That was considerate, Robert nodded. I figured you might be concerned. It was the least I could do, he hesitated. She had a great time. She's an amazing kid, Emily. Yes, she is. Emily studied him for a moment. You seem different. A small, rueful smile touched his lips. 3 months of therapy, manual labor, and facing the consequences of your worst mistakes will do that to a person. He glanced toward the house. Jessica mentioned she spoke to you about her new business. I think it's going to be really successful. I think so too, Emily agreed. She's asked me to participate in her financial literacy program. Robert's eyebrows rose in surprise. Are you going to do it? I haven't decided yet. Emily crossed her arms, suddenly feeling vulnerable. It would mean staying connected to a part of my life I've been trying to move beyond. For what it's worth, I think you'd be incredible at it, Robert said quietly. You have a way of making people feel understood and supported. That's a rare gift. Before Emily could respond, Chloe reappeared on the porch. Daddy, Grandpa wants to know if you can stay for dinner. He's making spaghetti with meatballs. Robert looked at Emily, clearly caught off guard. That's up to your mom, sweetheart. Emily was equally surprised by her father's invitation. Did Grandpa really ask that, Chloe? Chloe nodded vigorously. He said it's only polite since Daddy brought me back exactly on time. And we're having garlic bread too. Emily suppressed a smile, recognizing her father's diplomatic maneuvering. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. If you'd like to stay, Robert, you're welcome to. That evening, as the 4 of them sat around Richard's dining table, there was an initial awkwardness that gradually eased as Chloe dominated the conversation with tales of their museum adventure. Emily observed Robert, The gentle way he helped Chloe twirl her spaghetti, his genuine interest in her stories, the respect with which he treated Richard. It was a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with years ago, before ambition and pressure had warped him into someone she no longer recognized. After dinner, as Robert prepared to leave, he thanked Richard for the meal. "Best spaghetti in Oak Ridge, hands down," Richard chuckled. "High praise from an Italian-American. Your mother still makes the best sauce, though. How is Eleanor doing?" "She's good. Busy with her garden club and volunteer work at the hospital?" Robert smiled fondly. "She's been my rock through all this, though she doesn't spare me the hard truths when I need them." "Eleanor never was one to sugarcoat things," Richard agreed. "Tell her I send my regards." As Robert said goodbye to Chloe, promising to call before bedtime the next day, Emily walked him to the door. On the porch, away from Chloe's ears, Robert turned to her. "Thank you for today, Emily. For trusting me with Chloe, for dinner, for everything." Emily nodded, surprised to find that the anger that had sustained her for months had ebbed, leaving in its place a complicated mixture of caution and something almost like compassion. Chloe had a wonderful time. "That's what matters. Next Saturday, would it be okay if I took her to the park? There's a new playground they just installed. That should be fine." "Same time frame?" Robert nodded. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Jessica told me about the apartment listings you're looking at. If you need help with the security deposit or anything, we're managing," Emily said quickly. "But thank you for the offer." After he left, Emily found her father in the kitchen washing dishes. "That was a setup," she accused mildly. "The dinner invitation. Richard didn't deny it. I figured it was time to see if civilized interaction was possible. For Chloe's sake. And I think we all survived," Richard replied. "One meal at a time, Emmy. That's how new patterns are established." Later that night, after Chloe was asleep, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her apartment listings. The one near Chloe's preschool was ideal in many ways, but the security deposit was steep, especially on top of first and last month's rent. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Secured our first client today. Small plumbing contractor. Needs complete admin overhaul. Think you could help with their marketing materials. Would pay consultant fee. Let me know." Emily stared at the message, a sense of pieces falling into place washing over her. Perhaps the new foundation she was building didn't need to exclude every element of her past. Perhaps instead she could incorporate the strongest parts, transforming what had broken her into something that made her stronger. With newfound resolve, she circled the apartment listing, then reached for her phone to text Jessica back. "Congratulations. I'm in. For the consulting and the financial literacy program. Let's talk details soon." Winter descended upon Oak Ridge with a vengeance, blanketing the small Pennsylvania town in snow and forcing its residents to adapt to shorter days and frigid temperatures. For Emily, the changing season coincided with significant transitions in her own life. 2 weeks before Christmas, she and Chloe moved into their new apartment. A cozy 2-bedroom unit in a well-maintained building just 3 blocks from Chloe's preschool. Though modest compared to their former family home, the space felt like a fresh start, a tangible symbol of Emily's growing independence. "What do you think, Chloe Bear? Should we put the Christmas tree by the window or in the corner?" Emily asked as they stood in their still sparsely furnished living room, surrounded by boxes marked with Richard's neat handwriting. Chloe, bundled in a purple sweater, against the apartment's not yet optimal heating system, considered the question with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Window," she decided firmly, "so Santa can see it when he flies by." Emily smiled, making a mental note to pick up a tree stand during her lunch break tomorrow. The first Christmas after divorce was proving to be a minefield of emotions. Nostalgia for traditions past, determination to create new meaningful rituals, and the practical challenges of managing holiday magic on a single income. She was grateful that Robert had agreed to their alternating holiday schedule without dispute. Chloe would spend Christmas Eve and morning with Emily, then Christmas afternoon and the following day with Robert. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Jessica and Tanya, both red-cheeked from the cold and laden with shopping bags. "Housewarming delivery," Tanya announced, bustling past Emily into the apartment. "We come bearing essential supplies." Jessica followed more sedately. smiling at Emily's surprise. We figured moving in December was challenging enough without having to hunt down all the small necessities. As they unpacked their offerings, dish towels, cleaning supplies, a set of wine glasses, and a bottle of wine to christen them, Emily felt a surge of gratitude for these unexpected friendships. In the 4 months since the courthouse revelation, Jessica had transitioned from being a reminder of Robert's deception to becoming a valued ally. Her business was growing steadily, and she had already booked a community center conference room for their first financial literacy workshop in January. "Aunt Tanya, did you bring me something too?" Chloe asked hopefully, eyeing the bags. Tanya grinned, producing a small package wrapped in silver paper. "Would I forget my favorite munchkin? Here's something for your new bedroom." As Chloe tore into the gift, a nightlight that projected stars onto the ceiling, Emily's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Ms. Johnson? This is Derek Wilson from Lakeside Financial Services. I'm calling regarding the mortgage on the property at 1542 Maple Street." Emily's stomach dropped. That was their former family home, the one Robert had leveraged without her knowledge. "Yes, I'm afraid there's been a complication with the loan restructuring. We need to speak with both you and Mr. Johnson as soon as possible. Are you available to come to our office tomorrow morning?" Emily glanced at Jessica and Tanya, who were helping Chloe set up her new nightlight. "I'll need to check my schedule. Can you tell me what this is regarding specifically?" The banker's voice became more guarded. "It concerns a secondary lien on the property that wasn't disclosed in the initial restructuring negotiations. It's rather urgent, Ms. Johnson." After arranging a meeting for the following morning, Emily hung up, her mind racing. Just when she thought she had a handle on the financial mess Robert had created, another layer of deception emerged. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked, noting Emily's expression. "I don't think so," Emily admitted. "Something about another lien on the house that's just come up." Jessica frowned. "That's strange. The forensic accountant was thorough. If there was another loan against the property, it should have been found." "Unless it wasn't properly recorded," Tanya suggested, lawyer's mind immediately identifying the possibility. "Or it was taken out after the investigation." Emily shook her head. "Robert doesn't have access to any of our joint assets anymore. Everything's frozen pending the final divorce decree." "Want me to come with you tomorrow?" Tanya offered. "I can rearrange my morning appointments." Emily was tempted but shook her head. "I need to handle this myself. But thank you." Later that evening, after her friends had left and Chloe was asleep beneath her new starry ceiling, Emily called Robert. "I just got a call from Lakeside Financial," she said without preamble when he answered. "Something about another lien on the house that wasn't disclosed. The meeting is tomorrow at 10. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'll be there," Robert finally said, his voice tight. "Emily, I don't know what this is about." "I swear." "You've sworn a lot of things, Robert," Emily replied, too tired for anger. "Just be there tomorrow." The following morning, Emily dropped Chloe at preschool and drove to the financial services office in downtown Oak Ridge, her mind churning with possibilities, none of them good. Robert was already waiting in the parking lot, looking as anxious as she felt. "Have they told you anything more?" she asked as they walked toward the entrance together. Robert shook his head. "No. I called my attorney last night, but he couldn't find any record of another lien in the court documents either." Derek Wilson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually concerned expression, ushered them into a conference room where another man in a more expensive suit waited. "This is James Hargrove from our legal department," Wilson explained. "Thank you both for coming on such short notice." Hargrove opened a leather portfolio. 6 months ago, Lakeside Financial approved a bridge loan of $75,000 to Johnson Construction, secured by the property at 1542 Maple Street. The paperwork appeared to be in order, including Mrs. Johnson's signature on the consent forms. Emily stiffened. "I never signed anything like that." "We believe you," Hargrove said, sliding a document across the table. "When the loan came due last month without payment, we began processing foreclosure proceedings. That's when our document verification team flagged potential irregularities with your signature." Robert had gone pale. "I don't understand." "I never took out a bridge loan with Lakeside." Wilson and Hargrove exchanged glances. "The loan was processed through one of our junior loan officers, Trevor Mason. We've been investigating internally and have discovered that Mr. Mason was engaged in several unauthorized activities. He appears to have processed loans that didn't meet our standards, possibly in exchange for compensation from the recipients. Are you saying someone fraudulently took out a loan in our names? Emily asked, struggling to follow. Not exactly, Hargrove clarified. The loan was indeed made to Johnson Construction. The check was deposited into the company's account, but the application paperwork may have been manipulated after submission. Robert ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. I never dealt with anyone named Trevor Mason. My primary contact at Lakeside was always Margaret Chen. Wilson nodded. Ms. Chen was on maternity leave during that period. Mr. Mason was temporarily handling some of her clients. Emily felt like she might be sick. So there's a $75,000 loan against our house that neither of us knew about. And now it's in foreclosure. The foreclosure has been paused pending our investigation, Hargrove assured her. But yes, legally the loan exists and is in default. That's why we needed to speak with you both urgently. Robert leaned forward. Who took out this loan? Who received the money? Wilson slid another document across the table. The loan application was submitted by Vincent Reese, listed as Johnson Construction's CFO. Vincent? Robert looked genuinely shocked. He was our comptroller, not CFO, and he left the company over a year ago. Emily watched Robert carefully, trying to gauge if his surprise was genuine. After months of discovering his deceptions, she'd become adept at recognizing when he was hiding something. This time, his confusion appeared authentic. We're working with authorities to locate Mr. Reese, Hargrove explained. In the meantime, we need to discuss options regarding the outstanding loan. Options? Emily repeated incredulously. What options? We didn't take out this loan. Robert's business is dissolved. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. Unfortunately, regardless of how the loan originated, it is legally attached to your property, Wilson said apologetically. Without payment or restructuring, foreclosure proceedings will eventually continue. Robert stood up abruptly. This is insane. I'm calling my attorney right now. As Robert stepped out of the conference room, Emily remained seated, a peculiar calm settling over her. Just when she thought she had weathered the worst of the financial storm, a new tempest had arrived. What would restructuring entail? She asked quietly. Hargrove outlined a possible payment plan, one that would stretch Emily's already tight budget beyond breaking point. By the time Robert returned with his lawyer on speakerphone, Emily had a clearer understanding of just how precarious their situation was. The next 2 hours were consumed by legal discussions, document reviews, and increasingly tense exchanges. By early afternoon, one fact had become painfully clear. Unless Vincent Reese was found and held accountable, the Johnson family home, now vacant but still legally owned by both Emily and Robert, pending their final divorce, was at risk of foreclosure. As they left the financial services office, a light snow had begun to fall, adding a layer of bitter irony to the already bleak day. Emily pulled her coat tighter around herself, watching her breath form small clouds in the frigid air. "Emily, wait!" Robert called as she headed for her car. "We need to talk about this." She turned reluctantly. "What is there to say?" "Another financial disaster has landed in our laps. At this point, I'm almost numb to it. I had no idea Vincent was capable of something like this," Robert said, his expression haunted. "He worked for us for 5 years. My father trusted him completely. And where is he now?" "I don't know. After the company started struggling, he took a job with a firm in Pittsburgh. We didn't part on the best terms. He felt I wasn't being transparent about the company's financial situation." Robert laughed humorlessly. "Ironic, isn't it?" Emily studied her ex-husband's face. "Do you think he did this out of revenge? Maybe, or desperation. Or opportunity." Robert sighed heavily. "The bigger question is what we do now. I don't have $75,000, Robert. I don't have anything close to that." "Neither do I," he admitted. "Everything I make goes toward living expenses and paying down the debts I've already acknowledged. But the house, we can't just lose it, Emily. There's still equity there, despite everything. If we could sell it." "We can't sell it with an undisclosed lien and pending foreclosure," Emily pointed out. "No one would touch it." They stood in silence for a moment, snow accumulating on their shoulders. "We need to find Vincent," Robert finally said. My lawyer is already working on it. In the meantime, maybe we can pool resources to make the minimum payments and keep the foreclosure at bay." Emily laughed incredulously. "Pool resources? Robert, I just spent nearly everything I had on the security deposit and first month's rent for the apartment. Chloe needs winter clothes. Christmas is 2 weeks away. I don't have anything left to pool." Robert ran a hand across his face, brushing away snowflakes. "I know, I'm sorry. This isn't your mess to fix." "Except it is," Emily countered. "My name is on that house. My credit is at stake. My future with Chloe is at risk if this turns into a financial catastrophe." The mention of Chloe seemed to galvanize Robert. "We'll figure this out. I promise. And this time I mean it." Emily wanted to believe him, but experience had made her wary of his promises. "I need to pick up Chloe from preschool. We can talk more later." That evening, after Chloe was asleep, Emily called Tanya and Jessica, inviting them over for an emergency strategy session. They arrived bearing takeout and determination, listening intently as Emily explained the situation. "This Vincent guy committed fraud," Tanya said bluntly after Emily finished. "The bank should be going after him, not you." "They are," Emily assured her. "But that doesn't solve the immediate problem of the loan being in default." Jessica, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I remember Vincent. Thin guy, always wore bow ties. He left about 6 months before I started working directly with Robert." She hesitated. "There were rumors that some financial records went missing around the time he departed." "Robert never mentioned that," Emily said, surprised. "I don't think he knew," Jessica admitted. "The office manager at the time, Paula, mentioned it to me when I was first learning the company's filing system. She said Vincent had his own method of bookkeeping that no one else could decipher." Tanya leaned forward, legal mind engaged. "That could be significant. If he was already manipulating records back then, it establishes a pattern of behavior." The three women spent the next hour outlining possible approaches, legal avenues to pursue, temporary financial solutions, and practical steps to protect Emily and Chloe from further fallout. By the time her friends left, Emily had a clearer action plan, but still felt the heavy weight of uncertainty about their future. The following day was Saturday. Robert scheduled time with Chloe. When he arrived at the apartment for pickup, Emily could see the toll the new financial revelation had taken on him. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his shoulders carried a familiar tension she recognized from the final months of their marriage. "I thought we could go to the Christmas festival at the town square," Robert told Chloe, helping her with her coat. "They have a gingerbread house display and reindeer this year." Chloe's eyes widened. "Real reindeer? Like Rudolph?" "Well, probably more like Rudolph's cousins." Robert smiled, some of the tension leaving his face as he interacted with his daughter. As they prepared to leave, Robert turned to Emily. "I've been making calls all morning. My old friend Steve is a private investigator now. He's agreed to help track down Vincent as a favor to me." Emily nodded, grateful for the update, but still guarded. "Keep me informed." "I will." "And Emily," Robert hesitated. "I'm going to make this right, whatever it takes." After they left, Emily busied herself with unpacking the remaining boxes and setting up the small artificial Christmas tree she'd purchased. As she unwrapped ornaments, the few she'd taken from the family collection during her hurried departure from their home, memories flooded back. Chloe's first Christmas. The year Robert had surprised her with a hand-carved nativity set. Family gatherings with both sets of grandparents. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya. "Meeting with my contact at the regulatory agency Monday morning. Don't worry, we'll fight this." Emily sent back a grateful reply, then continued decorating. By the time the tree was finished, a small but cheerful beacon in their new living room, she had reached a decision. This latest crisis would not derail the progress she had made. Whatever happened with the house and the fraudulent loan, she would protect the home she was building for herself and Chloe, not the physical structure, but the sense of security and truth she had worked so hard to establish. When Robert returned with Chloe that evening, the little girl was bubbling with excitement about the festival, clutching a small stuffed reindeer and wearing a paper crown decorated with glitter. "We saw real reindeer, Mummy, and Daddy let me decorate a cookie all by myself. And we saw Santa, but I didn't sit on his lap, because there was a really long line. But Daddy said maybe next weekend we could go to the mall and see a different Santa, who might not be as busy." Emily smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you go put your reindeer on your bed and wash up for dinner?" As Chloe skipped off to her room, Robert lingered in the doorway. "Steve found something," he said quietly. "Vincent is working for a development company in Harrisburg now. He's using a slightly different name, Vincent R. Eastman instead of Vincent Reese, but it's definitely him." "That's good news, right?" Emily asked. "It's a start. My lawyer is preparing to contact him formally." Robert glanced around the apartment, noticing the decorated tree. "The place looks nice, homey." "We're getting there," Emily acknowledged. "It's different, but it's starting to feel like ours." A flash of something, regret perhaps, crossed Robert's face. "Emily, about this loan situation, I was thinking about my tools. I still have my professional workshop equipment in storage. If I sold it, I could probably raise enough for at least a few months of payments while we sort this out." Emily was taken aback by the offer. Robert's tools were his most prized possessions, many inherited from his father and grandfather. "You'd do that?" "In a heartbeat," he said without hesitation. "This mess with Vincent, it happened on my watch whether I knew about it or not. I was the one who hired him, who created an environment where something like this could happen. His willingness to take responsibility, to make a genuine sacrifice, touched something in Emily that she had thought long buried. "Let's wait to see what the lawyers say before you sell anything," she suggested. "But thank you for offering." After Robert left, Emily sat on the couch staring at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. The path forward was still uncertain, fraught with financial and legal complications. Yet amid the chaos, small moments of clarity were emerging, glimpses of the people they were becoming through this crucible of challenge and change. Her phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Reynolds. "Emily, I hope I'm not calling too late," the psychologist began. "I wanted to check in about the holiday arrangements for Chloe. Have there been any changes I should be aware of?" "No changes to the schedule," Emily assured her. "But there's a new financial complication with the house. Robert and I are trying to handle it without involving Chloe." Dr. Reynolds was silent for a moment. "How are you coping with this additional stress?" The question caught Emily off guard. Everyone had been asking about practical solutions, legal strategies, financial implications. No one had simply asked how she was feeling. She started, then stopped, surprising herself with the emotion that welled up. "I'm tired. Just when I thought I had found my footing, something else comes along to knock me off balance." "That's understandable," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "Recovery from betrayal isn't linear. There will be setbacks and new challenges. The question is whether you can face them differently now than you might have before." Emily considered this. Robert offered to sell his tools to help make the loan payments. 6 months ago, I would have seen that as just another attempt to win approval or manage his image. Today I actually believed he meant it. "That's significant," Dr. Reynolds observed, "for both of you. It suggests growth on his part and a capacity for nuanced perception on yours. You can acknowledge his positive actions without erasing the past harm or rushing to reconciliation." After ending the call, Emily checked on Chloe, who was already asleep. The new stuffed reindeer clutched against her chest. In the quiet of the apartment, with Christmas lights casting soft colors across her sleeping daughter's face, Emily allowed herself a moment of genuine hope. Not that the financial problems would magically resolve, or that co-parenting with Robert would become effortless, but that they were all individually and collectively developing the resilience and wisdom to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Christmas came and went in a flurry of wrapping paper, gingerbread crumbs, and carefully coordinated custody exchanges. Despite the financial cloud hanging over them, Emily and Robert had managed to create a peaceful holiday for Chloe, who seemed delighted by the novelty of 2 Christmases rather than troubled by the separation. Now, with January's bitter cold settling over Oakridge, the realities of their situation could no longer be held at bay by seasonal goodwill. Emily sat in the community center's small conference room, watching as Jessica arranged informational packets on the table. In 15 minutes, their first financial literacy workshop would begin, and despite her experience with public speaking through her event planning work, Emily felt unusually nervous. "What if no one comes?" she whispered to Jessica. "Or worse, what if they come and I can't help?" "Them?" Jessica paused in her preparations. people will come. The registration list is full, and you don't need to have all the answers, Emily. That's why we have the accountant and the credit counselor joining us. Your role is to share your experience, to show these women that financial setbacks don't define them. Before Emily could respond, the door opened and a woman in her mid-40s peered in hesitantly. "Is this the Taking Control of Your Financial Future workshop?" "Yes, please come in," Jessica welcomed her warmly. "I'm Jessica Parker, and this is my co-facilitator, Emily Johnson." Over the next 10 minutes, the room filled with women of various ages, some freshly divorced, others contemplating separation, a few simply seeking to become more financially literate within their marriages. As Emily began her portion of the presentation, sharing the sanitized version of her own financial awakening, she found herself drawing strength from the nodding heads and understanding eyes before her. "The most important thing I've learned," she concluded, "is that financial empowerment isn't just about numbers and accounts. It's about claiming your right to understand, to question, and to participate in decisions that affect your future." During the networking session that followed the formal presentation, a young woman approached Emily. "Your story really resonated with me," she said quietly. "My husband handles all our finances. Whenever I ask questions, he says I shouldn't worry about it, that he has everything under control. Until today, I thought maybe I was being paranoid for feeling uncomfortable with that arrangement." Emily smiled encouragingly. "Trust your instincts. There's a difference between dividing responsibilities and being kept in the dark. A partner who values your well-being will welcome your involvement, not discourage it." By the time the workshop ended, Emily felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in months. On her way out, Jessica squeezed her arm. That was exactly what these women needed to hear. "Same time next week?" Emily nodded, already thinking of ways to refine her presentation based on the questions participants had asked. "I'll be here." The January sky was already dark as Emily drove to pick up Chloe from her father's apartment. The court had recently approved an expanded visitation schedule, allowing Robert to have Chloe overnight every other weekend and one weekday evening. Though initially hesitant, Emily had to admit that the arrangement was working well. Chloe seemed more settled with the predictable schedule, and Robert had proven consistently reliable in adhering to the agreed-upon times and rules. When she arrived, Chloe was sitting at Robert's small kitchen table, focused intently on what appeared to be homework. Robert stood at the stove stirring something that smelled surprisingly good. "Mommy," Chloe looked up with a grin. "Daddy's teaching me to write in cursive. Look, I can do my whole name." Emily examined the practice sheet where Chloe had written, "Chloe Elizabeth Johnson" in wobbly but recognizable cursive. "That's impressive, sweetheart. When did you get interested in cursive?" "Miss Karen at school showed us yesterday. She said we don't learn it until 2nd grade, but I told her I wanted to start now." Chloe returned to her careful letter formation. Robert turned from the stove. "Hope you don't mind that I fed her dinner. We lost track of time with the cursive project." "It's fine," Emily assured him, sniffing the air appreciatively. "Whatever you made smells delicious. Just pasta with my grandmother's marinara recipe." Robert smiled slightly. "Mom's been teaching me to cook actual meals instead of relying on takeout. Says it's an essential life skill I should have learned years ago." Emily suppressed a smile, remembering Robert's previous culinary attempts during their marriage, experiments that had often ended with smoke alarms and pizza delivery. "Eleanor's right. It is an essential skill. There's plenty if you'd like some," Robert offered, gesturing to the pot. "I always make too much." Under normal circumstances, Emily would have politely declined. But the workshop had run longer than expected, and the thought of going home to cook was unappealing. "Actually, that would be great. Thanks." As Robert prepared a plate for her, Emily noticed changes in his apartment since her last visit. Bookshelves had been installed along one wall, filled with a mix of volumes, carpentry manuals, novels, and a surprising number of parenting books. A framed photograph of Chloe stood on an end table, alongside a smaller photo that Emily recognized as one taken at their wedding. Robert caught her looking at the wedding photo. "I hope that's okay," he said quietly, setting the pasta in front of her. "It was a good day." "One of our best." Emily nodded, unexpectedly moved by the simple statement. It had been a good day, a celebration of hopes and promises that had ultimately gone unfulfilled but genuine nonetheless. "How was the workshop?" Robert asked, changing the subject as he sat down across from her. Emily twirled pasta around her fork. "Better than I expected." 23 women showed up, each with her own story of financial confusion or concern. It felt good to offer something constructive from our guilt experience. "I'm glad." Robert's sincerity was evident. "Jessica mentioned you might be developing a specialized version for women entrepreneurs. That sounds perfect for your skill set." The conversation shifted to practical matters: Chloe's upcoming dental appointment, a school project that required specific supplies, the latest update on the search for Vincent Reese. Robert's private investigator friend had confirmed Vincent's employment in Harrisburg, but attempts to serve him with legal papers had so far been unsuccessful. "He seems to know we're looking for him," Robert explained. "Steve says he's been calling in sick whenever they try to approach him at work, and his home address is just a P.O. box." Emily sighed, setting down her fork. "Meanwhile, the bank is pressuring us to start making payments on the fraudulent loan. I spoke with my lawyer this morning. He thinks we have grounds for an emergency injunction to halt any foreclosure proceedings while the fraud investigation continues." Robert ran a hand through his hair. "But it's going to require both of us to appear in court again." "Probably next week," Emily nodded, resigned. "Just let me know when. I'll arrange coverage at work." As they were speaking, Chloe had been putting away her cursive practice and getting her coat. Now she returned to the table, looking between her parents with a thoughtful expression that seemed too mature for her 4-year-old face. "Are you talking about the house problem?" she asked. Emily and Robert exchanged surprised glances. "What do you know about that, sweetheart?" Emily asked carefully. Chloe shrugged. "I heard you and Aunt Tanya talking. You said a bad man took money and now the bank wants to take our old house." She looked at her father. "Is that why we all can't live there anymore?" Robert knelt down to Chloe's level. "The house problem is complicated, Chloe, but it's not something you need to worry about. Mommy and I are working together to fix it." "But if you fix it, can we all live together again?" Chloe's question hung in the air, layered with hope and childish logic that made Emily's heart contract. "No, sweetheart," Emily said gently, joining Robert at their daughter's level. "Daddy and I living in separate places isn't because of the house problem. It's because we decided we can be better parents to you this way. But we both love you very much, and that will never change." Chloe digested this information, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Like Maddie's parents at school? They live in different houses too, but they both come to her ballet shows." "Exactly like that," Robert confirmed, relief evident in his voice. "And just like Maddie's parents, your mom and I will always be at your ballet shows and school plays and everything else important." Chloe seemed satisfied with this explanation. As they drove home, however, Emily found herself troubled by the conversation. Despite their efforts to shield Chloe from their adult problems, their perceptive daughter had clearly absorbed more than they realized. She made a mental note to speak with Dr. Reynolds about how to better manage these revelations. The following Tuesday, Emily and Robert sat side by side in a small courtroom as their respective lawyers presented arguments for an emergency injunction against Lakeside Financial. The proceeding was less dramatic than their initial divorce hearing, no surprise revelations or emotional outbursts, but the stakes felt just as high. Judge Simmons, who had overseen their divorce case, studied the documentation before her with a furrowed brow. "Let me make sure I understand the sequence of events," she said finally. "Mr. Johnson's former employee allegedly forged signatures to secure a loan against the marital property without either of your knowledge or consent. This occurred during your separation, but before the divorce proceedings began. Is that correct?" Both lawyers confirmed this timeline. "And what steps have been taken to locate this Vincent Reese?" the judge asked. Robert's lawyer explained the ongoing private investigation and the difficulty in serving Reese with papers. "We believe he is deliberately evading contact, Your Honor." Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully. "Based on the evidence presented, I am inclined to grant the injunction. However," she added, looking directly at Emily and Robert, "this is a temporary measure. The underlying issue of the fraudulent loan will need to be resolved, one way or another. I am ordering both parties to work cooperatively with law enforcement and Lakeside Financial to pursue all available remedies. Outside the courtroom, Emily felt a weight temporarily lift from her shoulders. "That buys us some time, at least," she said to Robert as they walked toward the parking lot. "My lawyer thinks we should consider filing a civil suit against Vincent," Robert replied. "Even if we can't find him immediately, it establishes our legal position." Emily nodded in agreement. Tanya suggested the same thing. "She's been invaluable through all of this." They had reached Emily's car. As she unlocked it, Robert hesitated. "Emily, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you about the house." "What about it?" she asked cautiously. "I've been thinking, regardless of how the Vincent situation resolves, maybe we should consider selling the house anyway. Once the legal cloud is lifted, of course." Emily was surprised. "But you've been fighting so hard to save it." "I have," Robert acknowledged, "partly out of guilt, partly out of nostalgia. But the truth is, neither of us lives there anymore. We're both establishing new homes. The house is just sitting empty, a reminder of what went wrong rather than what was good." Emily considered his words. The family home had once represented everything she thought she wanted: security, permanence, the perfect setting for raising their daughter. Now it felt more like a burden than a blessing. "What would we do with any proceeds after the legitimate loans are paid off?" "Set it aside for Chloe's education," Robert suggested. "Give ourselves a fresh start, without that physical reminder of the past hanging over us." There was wisdom in the proposal, a practical solution, but also a symbolic one. Letting go of the house meant letting go of certain dreams and expectations. But perhaps that was necessary for both of them to move forward. "Let's see how the Vincent situation plays out first," Emily finally said. "But I'm not opposed to the idea in principle." Robert nodded, seemingly pleased by her openness. As they were about to part ways, his phone rang. After a brief conversation, his expression transformed from neutral to animated. "That was Steve," he told Emily excitedly. "They found Vincent. He's been staying with a girlfriend in Allentown. Steve's contact in the local police department is bringing him in for questioning right now." "That's fantastic news," Emily replied, feeling a surge of hope. "Will you keep me updated?" "Of course. I'll call as soon as I hear anything more." As January gave way to February, developments in the Vincent Reese case unfolded rapidly. When confronted with the evidence against him, Vincent initially denied everything, claiming he had proper authorization for all financial transactions. But when presented with the forensic analysis of the forged signatures and the testimony of the disgraced loan officer Trevor Mason, he eventually cracked. In a plea agreement that spared him jail time but required full restitution, Vincent admitted to a pattern of financial manipulation dating back several years. He had been skimming from Johnson construction accounts, using creative bookkeeping to hide his activities. When the company began struggling, he had grown more desperate and eventually resorted to the fraudulent loan as a last-ditch effort to cover his tracks before leaving the company. On a snowy afternoon in mid-February, Emily received a call from Robert's lawyer. "Good news, Mrs. Johnson," he announced without preamble. "Lakeside Financial has agreed to cancel the fraudulent loan entirely as part of their settlement with the regulatory authorities. They're filing the paperwork to remove the lien from your property this afternoon." Relief washed over Emily, so profound she had to sit down. "So it's over? Just like that?" "The bank's part is over," the lawyer clarified. "Vincent Reese will still be required to make restitution payments, but those will go directly to the bank as part of their insurance claim. Your home is clear of this particular encumbrance." After ending the call, Emily sat quietly, processing the news. The nightmare that had begun with Chloe's innocent revelation in the courtroom nearly 8 months ago was finally resolving. The practical problems weren't all solved. The divorce still needed to be finalized, co-parenting challenges remained, and rebuilding her financial security would take time, but the acute crisis had passed. She called Robert, who had already heard from his lawyer. "It's hard to believe," he said, his voice reflecting her own sense of cautious relief. "After all these months, to have it resolved so suddenly." "I know," Emily agreed. "I keep waiting for another shoe to drop." "I think we've had enough shoes for one divorce," Robert joked, drawing a surprised laugh from Emily. "Listen, I was going to wait until our next custody exchange to bring this up, but since we're talking, I had an interesting job offer yesterday." "Oh?" Emily found herself genuinely curious. Mike and Tony's contracting business is expanding. They've asked me to come on as a partner, not managing the business side, but leading the custom cabinetry and finish carpentry division. It would mean more stability, benefits, potentially better income down the road. That sounds perfect for you, Robert. Your craftsmanship was always exceptional. Thanks. It feels right. Getting back to what I was good at before I got caught up in trying to be the businessman my father was. He paused. The only downside is that some of the jobs would require travel to job sites around the state. Nothing extreme, but I might need to adjust some of my visitation days occasionally. I wanted to discuss it with you before accepting. Emily appreciated the consideration, so I'm sure we can work around your schedule as needed. Chloe would be thrilled to know you're building things again. She still talks about that dollhouse you made for her 3rd birthday. I thought maybe I could make her a new one, Robert suggested. Something that could travel between our homes, with rooms that reflect both places. The thoughtfulness of the idea touched Emily. It acknowledged their separate lives while creating continuity for their daughter. Exactly the balance they had been working toward in their co-parenting relationship. She would love that, Emily said softly. 2 days later, Emily hosted a small gathering at her apartment to celebrate the resolution of the lakeside financial situation and to thank those who had supported her through the ordeal. Tanya brought champagne, Jessica supplied gourmet cupcakes, and Richard arrived with a bouquet of Emily's favorite flowers, yellow tulips that brightened the winter-dark apartment with their promise of spring. Eleanor Johnson came as well, bringing a homemade lasagna and, to Emily's surprise, the hand-carved nativity set that Robert had given Emily years ago. I found this when I was helping Robert organize his storage unit, she explained. He thought you might want it for Chloe. As the evening progressed, Emily found herself in a quiet conversation with her former mother-in-law, while the others debated the merits of various streaming services in the living room. You've handled all of this with remarkable grace. Emily, Eleanor said, her eyes warm with approval. Not everyone would have found the strength to rebuild so effectively. Emily smiled, touched by the compliment. I had good examples of resilience in my life. My father, after my mother left, you after Frank passed, and honestly, Chloe has been my greatest motivation. She deserves parents who can rise above their difficulties. Eleanor nodded in understanding. Robert has changed too, you know. This experience broke something in him, his pride, his need to maintain appearances at all costs. But in breaking, it allowed something truer to emerge. She touched Emily's hand lightly. I'm not suggesting that makes up for the hurt he caused. Only that good can sometimes come from our worst mistakes. I've seen the changes, Emily acknowledged. He's more present with Chloe now than he ever was when we were married. More honest about his limitations. More willing to ask for help. That's the Johnson family curse, Eleanor said with a wry smile. Stubborn self-reliance taken to destructive extremes. Frank had it too, though he managed it better than our son did. I've been examining my own role in perpetuating that pattern. In therapy, if you can believe it. At my age, Emily laughed softly. It's never too late to grow, right? That's what I'm trying to teach Chloe. Later, as her guests were preparing to leave, Tanya pulled Emily aside. So, what happens now with the house? Are you going to move back in? Emily shook her head. No. Robert and I have decided to sell it once the divorce is final. This apartment feels more like home now anyway. And what about Robert? Tanya asked carefully. These past few months you two seem to have found a way to work together that I wouldn't have thought possible last summer. We're co-parents, Emily said simply. We're trying to do that well for Chloe's sake. Just co-parents, Tanya pressed. Emily considered the question seriously. For now, yes. The trust that was broken can't be repaired overnight, if ever. But I can acknowledge that the man he's becoming is someone I can respect, even if I can't forget the harm done by the man he was. As February's chill gave way to March's tentative warmth, Emily found herself standing beside Robert in Judge Simmons' courtroom once again. This time, however, they were there for the final decree of their divorce, the legal end to a chapter of their lives that had already emotionally concluded. The court has reviewed the settlement agreement and finds it equitable and in the best interest of the minor child, Judge Simmons declared. Joint legal custody with primary physical residence with the mother and liberal visitation for the father is hereby approved. The agreement to sell the marital home and place proceeds in trust for the child's education is also approved. With a final stroke of her pen, Judge Simmons made official what had been unfolding for nearly 9 months. I commend both parties on reaching this agreement amicably and putting the needs of your child first. This case has had more than its share of complications, but you've both shown growth and maturity in navigating them. Outside the courtroom, Robert turned to Emily. So that's it. Officially divorced. Officially divorced, Emily echoed, the finality of the words settling over her. I never thought it would end this way, Robert admitted. When we got married, I truly believed it was forever. So did I, Emily said softly. But life had other plans for us. Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than bitter. Do you remember what the minister said at our wedding? About how marriage isn't just about the happy times, but about how we face challenges together. I remember. I failed at that part spectacularly, Robert acknowledged, but maybe there's still a chance to get the co-parenting part right, to face those challenges better than I did our marital ones. Emily studied the man before her, so different from the desperate, deceptive person who had sat across from her in this same courthouse 9 months ago. I think we're already doing that one day at a time. As they walked toward the courthouse exit, Robert asked, Will you be at Chloe's preschool art show next week? Front row, Emily confirmed. She's very proud of her butterfly painting. She made me promise to clap extra loud, Robert smiled, even if it's not very good. Especially if it's not very good, Emily corrected, returning his smile. They parted ways at the courthouse steps, legally no longer husband and wife, but forever connected through the child they both loved, and through the unexpected journey that had transformed them both in ways neither could have anticipated on that fateful day when truth had spilled from the lips of a 3-year-old girl who simply wanted her mother to have back her sparkly things. Spring bloomed in Oakridge with a vengeance, as if nature itself was determined to erase the memory of winter's harshness. Cherry blossoms lined the town square, daffodils dotted the community center's gardens, and the air carried the promise of renewal. For Emily, the season's transformation mirrored her own journey, gradual, sometimes painful, but ultimately moving toward growth. On a particularly beautiful Saturday morning in April, she stood in the driveway of what had once been her dream home, watching as a young couple walked the property with a real estate agent. The for sale sign had been in the yard for just 3 weeks, but interest had been strong, with multiple showings and 2 offers already. They look right for this house, Eleanor Johnson observed, standing beside Emily. The older woman had come to collect some remaining family heirlooms before the property changed hands. Young, full of plans, probably see themselves raising children here. Emily nodded, feeling a bittersweet pang as the woman, clearly pregnant beneath her flowing spring dress, paused to admire the blooming magnolia tree that Emily had planted shortly after they bought the house. I hope they'll be happy here. Places hold the energy we bring to them, Eleanor mused. This was a good house for many years. The difficulties at the end don't erase that. The wisdom in Eleanor's perspective struck Emily. Despite everything that had happened, there had been joy within these walls. Chloe's first steps across the living room floor, holiday gatherings that filled the kitchen with laughter, quiet evenings on the back porch watching fireflies with Robert before their marriage began to fray. As if summoned by her thoughts, Robert's truck pulled into the driveway. He'd been stopping by on weekends to address minor repairs flagged during the home inspection, a loose banister, a leaky faucet, the temperamental garage door opener that had always been his nemesis. How's our prospective buyer looking? He asked, joining Emily and his mother, as the real estate agent led the couple to the backyard. Promising, Emily replied. Tracy says they're pre-approved and love the neighborhood. Robert nodded, watching, the couple with a wistfulness that matched Emily's own. Good. The sooner we close this chapter, the better for everyone. He turned to his mother. Ready to tackle the attic, Mom? I brought the boxes you asked for. As Eleanor and Robert headed inside, Emily remained in the driveway, allowing herself A moment to say a silent goodbye to the home that had once represented all her hopes for the future. The sadness she felt was clean now, uncomplicated by anger or betrayal. Just the natural grief of moving on. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Workshop materials finalized, 35 registrations for next Saturday. We're going to need a bigger room." Emily smiled, typing a quick reply. The financial literacy program had exceeded all expectations, expanding from monthly to bi-weekly sessions and attracting attention from women throughout the county. What had begun as a small personal mission had evolved into a genuine community resource, with Emily finding her voice as an advocate and educator. The real estate agent emerged from the backyard, her clients following with animated expressions. "They'd like to see the master bedroom again," Tracy told Emily, with a meaningful glance that suggested good news. "And they're asking about closing timelines." "I'll get out of your way," Emily said, heading toward her car. "Let me know if they have any questions I can answer." As she drove away from her former home, Emily felt a surprising lightness. The property that had once been the site of so much pain was transforming into an asset for Chloe's future. A college fund that would open doors neither Emily nor Robert had anticipated when they'd first signed the mortgage papers. Her next stop was Tanya's office downtown. Her friend had recently made partner at her law firm and had expanded her practice to include a focus on helping women navigate financial aspects of divorce, inspired, she often said, by Emily's experience. "Perfect timing," Tanya greeted her, ushering Emily into a conference room where lunch was laid out. "I'm starving, and I have big news." Emily raised an eyebrow, helping herself to a sandwich. "Don't keep me in suspense." "Remember that proposal? We submitted to the State Bar Association about establishing a pro bono program for women facing financial fraud during divorce." Tanya's eyes sparkled with excitement. "It has been approved. Full funding for the pilot program with a dedicated attorney position." "Tanya, that's amazing," Emily exclaimed. "All those late nights drafting the proposal paid off." "It wasn't just the proposal," Tanya said, suddenly serious. "It was your story. The way you presented it in that meeting with such clarity and without self-pity. You put a human face on the legal principles we were advocating for." Emily felt a flush of pride at her friend's words. "When is the program launching?" "September." "And about that?" Tanya hesitated. "The committee wants you involved, officially as a paid consultant. They were impressed with the educational materials you developed for Jessica's workshops and think your perspective would be valuable in training the attorneys." The offer caught Emily off guard. "Me? I don't have any legal background." "But you have lived experience and a gift for translating complicated financial concepts into accessible language." Tanya leaned forward. "Think about it, Em. This could be a perfect complement to your community center work. Part-time, flexible hours, meaningful impact." By the time Emily left Tanya's office, her mind was buzzing with possibilities. What had begun as a personal catastrophe was continuing to evolve into unexpected opportunities, not just to rebuild her own life, but to help others facing similar challenges. That evening, as she prepared dinner in her apartment, now fully furnished and decorated to reflect her emerging taste, rather than the compromise aesthetic of her marriage, Chloe sat at the kitchen counter, chattering about her day with Robert. "Daddy took me to his workshop," she announced, carefully coloring within the lines of her placemat. "He's making a special present, but it's a surprise, so I can't tell you what it is." "Is that so?" Emily smiled, stirring the pasta sauce. "And did you have fun at the workshop?" Chloe nodded enthusiastically. "Uncle Mike let me use the special pencil that real builders use, and Daddy showed me how to measure twice and cut once. That's a very important rule." Emily's heart warmed at the image of Robert sharing his craft with their daughter. His partnership with Mike and Tony had flourished over the past few months, with their contracting business landing several significant renovation projects. Robert seemed to have found his place, not as the company figurehead his father had been, but as a skilled craftsman whose work spoke for itself. "Daddy has a friend named Lisa," Chloe continued casually. "She came to the workshop too. She designs kitchens and bathrooms." Emily's hand stilled momentarily on the wooden spoon. "Oh, Is she nice? Uh-huh. She has curly red hair and freckles, and she knows all about different kinds of wood. Chloe looked up from her coloring. Daddy said she might come to my ballet recital if that's okay with you. Emily processed this information, surprised by her own reaction. After nearly a year of separation and the finalization of their divorce, it was inevitable that Robert would eventually date. Yet the concrete reality of it, a woman with curly red hair and knowledge of woodworking who might attend Chloe's recital, felt suddenly, unexpectedly real. Of course it's okay, Emily managed, keeping her voice light. The more people who come to cheer for you, the better. Later that night, after Chloe was asleep, Emily called Dr. Reynolds. Their sessions had become less frequent as the family had stabilized, but the psychologist remained an important sounding board. It's perfectly normal to have complex feelings about Robert dating, Dr. Reynolds assured her after Emily explained her unsettled reaction. Even in the most amicable divorces, seeing an ex-partner move on can trigger unexpected emotions. But I don't want him back, Emily clarified, pacing her living room. Our marriage is over for good reason. I've accepted that. Acceptance doesn't mean the absence of feelings, Dr. Reynolds pointed out. It might be helpful to ask yourself what specifically triggered your reaction. Was it concern for Chloe? A sense of being replaced? Perhaps even a reminder that you haven't yet ventured into dating yourself. Emily considered this last suggestion. She had been so focused on stabilizing her life with Chloe, developing her career, and navigating the divorce that romance had seemed an unnecessary complication. Now, with the major legal and financial hurdles behind her, was it time to consider that aspect of her life again? The following Tuesday evening, Emily attended a parent-teacher conference at Chloe's preschool. As she sat in the tiny chair across from Miss Karen, listening to glowing reports of her daughter's progress, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the hallway, Daniel Foster, whose daughter Maddie was in Chloe's class. Daniel was a single father, his wife having relocated to California for work 2 years earlier. Emily had encountered him at numerous school events and had always found him pleasant, a thoughtful, soft-spoken man who coached youth soccer on weekends and apparently made legendary Halloween costumes. After her conference concluded, Emily found herself walking to the parking lot at the same time as Daniel. Always a relief when they say our kids are doing well, isn't it? He remarked with a warm smile. Makes you feel like maybe you're not messing up this parenting thing completely. Emily laughed. Exactly. Though I suspect Chloe succeeds in spite of me, rather than because of me some days. They fell into easy conversation about the upcoming spring festival at the school, where Daniel had volunteered to run the face-painting booth. I'm actually terrible at it, he admitted. But no one else stepped up, and the kids don't seem to mind if their butterfly looks more like a blob with antennae. I could help, Emily offered impulsively. I used to face paint at community events in college. It's like riding a bicycle. You never really forget how to turn a 5-year-old into a tiger. Daniel's expression brightened. That would be amazing. Maybe we could meet for coffee this weekend. To coordinate our booth strategy, of course. There was a hint of something more in his invitation, a tentative opening that Emily could either walk through or politely decline. I'd like that, she found herself saying. Saturday morning? As Emily drove home, she felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the simple anticipation of connecting with someone new, someone whose life story hadn't yet intersected with hers in all the complicated ways Robert's had. When she arrived at the apartment, Richard was just leaving, having spent the evening with Chloe. Everything okay at school? He asked. Better than okay. Chloe's thriving. Emily hung up her coat. Dad, when did you know you were ready to date again after Mom left? Richard looked surprised by the question. I didn't plan it. I just met someone at a school fundraiser who made me laugh for the first time in months, and I realized I wanted to hear that laugh again. He studied his daughter. Are you considering dipping a toe back in those waters? Emily shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Maybe. There's a dad from Chloe's class, Daniel Foster. We're having coffee on Saturday. Richard nodded approvingly. The widower? Seems like a good man. Maddie comes over for playdates sometimes. He's divorced, not widowed, Emily corrected. His ex-wife lives in San Francisco. My mistake. Still, coffee is a good start. Low pressure, Richard kissed her cheek. Just remember who you are now, Emmy. Not who you were when you were with Robert or who you thought you should be. The woman you've become this past year, that's who should be having coffee on Saturday. His words stayed with Emily throughout the week. Who had she become? The crisis that began with Chloe's courtroom revelation had forced her to rediscover herself, not as Robert Johnson's wife or even just as Chloe's mother, but as Emily Wilson Johnson, a woman with her own strengths, values, and purpose. Saturday morning found her at Oak Ridge Coffee Roasters, sharing a table with Daniel Foster, and discovering the easy rhythm of conversation with someone who carried his own past, but wasn't entangled in hers. They talked about their children, their work — he was an environmental engineer with a local firm — and eventually, cautiously, about their failed marriages. Claire and I tried the long-distance thing for a year, Daniel explained, turning his coffee cup in his hands. But eventually, we had to admit her career in California and my roots here were incompatible. Joint custody across the country is challenging, but we make it work. Maddie spends summers and holidays with her mom. That must be difficult, Emily said, impressed by his matter-of-fact acceptance. Daniel nodded. It was brutal at first, but we both love Maddie enough to keep our conflicts away from her. He smiled slightly. What about you? Maddie mentions playdates with Chloe at both your place and her dad's. Emily found herself sharing a condensed version of her journey. The financial deception, the courthouse revelation, the gradual rebuilding of a co-parenting relationship from the ashes of betrayal. To her surprise, telling the story no longer carried the emotional charge it once had. It was simply part of her history now, not the defining narrative of her life. That's quite a journey, Daniel said when she finished. Sounds like you've handled it with remarkable grace. Emily laughed softly. Not always. There were plenty of nights spent crying in the shower so Chloe wouldn't hear. But we got through it. All of us. Including your ex? Including Robert, Emily confirmed. He's not the same person who lied to me. I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust him again, but I respect who he's becoming. Daniel considered this. That's a healthy perspective. Maddie's mom and I never had that kind of betrayal to overcome, but reaching the point of genuine respect took work. He glanced at his watch. Speaking of work, we should probably figure out this face-painting booth before I have to pick up Maddie from her swim lesson. They spent the next half hour planning the logistics for the spring festival, their conversation shifting easily between practical details and personal stories. When they finally parted ways in the coffee shop parking lot, Daniel hesitated before asking, "Would you and Chloe like to join Maddie and me for a picnic at Riverside Park next weekend? They're having an outdoor concert. Nothing fancy, just the community band. But the kids could play while we listen." Emily smiled, recognizing the invitation for what it was, not a dramatic leap into romance, but a gentle step toward exploring possibilities. "We'd love that." That evening, when Robert dropped Chloe off after their weekend time together, Emily noticed he seemed unusually nervous. "Is everything okay?" she asked as Chloe ran inside to show Richard a birdhouse they had built together. "Everything's fine," Robert assured her. There's something I wanted to talk to you about." He took a breath. "I've been seeing someone. Her name is Lisa Donovan. She's an interior designer who works with our contracting company." Emily nodded, Chloe's casual mention of the red-haired woman now confirmed. Chloe mentioned meeting her. "It's fairly new," Robert continued, "but it's becoming significant enough that I wanted you to hear about it directly from me, not through Chloe or community gossip." The consideration in this gesture, his awareness of how such news might affect her, touched Emily unexpectedly. "I appreciate that, Robert. Lisa understands our situation," he added. "She knows that Chloe is my priority and that co-parenting with you comes first. But she'd like to attend Chloe's ballet recital next month, if that wouldn't make you uncomfortable." Emily thought of her coffee with Daniel, the picnic planned for the following weekend, her own tentative steps toward a new chapter. Of course she's welcome. The more support for Chloe, the better. Relief washed over Robert's face. "Thank you. And while we're having awkward conversations, Mom mentioned seeing you with someone at the coffee shop this morning. She wasn't spying," he added quickly. "She just happened to be there with her garden club friends." Emily smiled, imagining Eleanor's careful observation and inevitable report to her son. That was Daniel Foster. His daughter Maddie is in Chloe's class. We're helping with the face painting booth at the Spring Festival. Robert nodded, processing this information with what appeared to be genuine goodwill. Good, that's good. You deserve happiness. Emily. As she watched him drive away, Emily was struck by the strangeness of their situation. Two people who had once shared everything, now carefully navigating the boundaries of their new relationship with awkward courtesy and genuine effort. Inside, she found Chloe showing Richard the intricate birdhouse she and Robert had built, complete with a tiny porch and miniature shingles on the roof. Daddy says we can hang it in the big tree outside my bedroom window, Chloe explained excitedly. And next weekend we're going to build one for Grandpa's yard too. Richard examined the craftsmanship with appreciation. This is excellent work. Your dad's really returning to his roots with this carpentry. He says making things with his hands makes his heart happy, Chloe reported, repeating what she had clearly heard from Robert. And it's okay if they're not perfect as long as you try your best. The simple wisdom in these words, the lesson Robert seemed to be internalizing, then passing on to their daughter, resonated deeply with Emily. Perfection had been a trap for both of them in different ways. Robert's desperate attempts to maintain the appearance of success, Emily's carefully constructed ideal of family life. Learning to embrace imperfection, to build something genuine rather than flawless, was perhaps the most valuable lesson from their shared ordeal. Later that night, after Chloe was asleep, Emily sat on her small balcony, watching the spring stars emerge above Oakridge. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya. How was coffee with Daniel? Details required. Emily smiled, typing her reply. Nice, easy, normal picnic planned for next weekend. Tanya responded immediately. Normal sounds perfect. You deserve normal after all the drama, though I expect full picnic report. As Emily set her phone aside, she reflected on how far she had come from that devastating day in the courtroom. The journey hadn't been straightforward. There had been setbacks, unexpected complications, moments of doubt and despair. But somewhere along the way, while she was focused on simply putting one foot in front of the other, she had built a new foundation for herself and Chloe, one based on truth, resilience, and the courage to begin again. The next morning, Emily woke early and found Chloe already up, sitting in the living room window seat with the stuffed reindeer Robert had bought her at the Christmas festival months earlier. What are you doing up so early, sweetheart? Emily asked, joining her daughter on the cushioned seat. Watching for birds, Chloe explained seriously. Daddy says our birdhouse needs to settle in before the birds will trust it enough to make it their home. Emily stroked her daughter's sleep-tousled hair. That makes sense. Trust takes time to build. Chloe nodded, leaning against her mother's side. Like you and Daddy. You trust each other more now than before, right? The perceptiveness of the question startled Emily. In some ways, yes. We trust each other to take good care of you and to tell the truth now. But you still can't live in the same house, Chloe clarified, working through her understanding of their situation. That's right. Sometimes when trust is broken in certain ways, people are happier living apart, even when they both love the same little girl very much. Chloe seemed to accept this explanation. After a moment of comfortable silence, she asked, Is Mr. Daniel going to be your special friend now? Like Ms. Lisa is Daddy's special friend? Emily chose her words carefully. Mr. Daniel is becoming a friend. I enjoy talking with him, and Maddie is your friend. We'll see what happens. How would you feel about that? Chloe considered the question with endearing seriousness. I like Mr. Daniel. He's funny and he knows all about frogs. But he wouldn't be my dad, right? Because I already have a dad. Exactly, Emily assured her. No one could ever replace your dad. That's not what this is about. Satisfied, Chloe returned her attention to the window. Look, Mommy! A bluebird just checked out our birdhouse. As they watched the curious bird circle the structure Robert and Chloe had built together, Emily felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. Their family had been restructured, foundations rebuilt, old wounds gradually healing, and in that rebuilding, something sturdy and authentic had emerged. Not perfect, but real. Not what she had once imagined, but perhaps what they had all needed to become who they truly were. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in the Oakridge County Courthouse, when a 3-year-old Chloe Johnson had raised her small hand and changed the trajectory of her family forever. Now on a brilliant June morning, 6-year-old Chloe stood on the stage of Oak Ridge Elementary School's auditorium, her honey blonde hair neatly braided and her eyes bright with excitement as she prepared to introduce her family for the first grade Family Celebration Day. Emily sat in the second row, between Daniel Foster and her father Richard. In the 3 years since her divorce from Robert had been finalized, her relationship with Daniel had evolved naturally from friendship to romance, and for the past year to a comfortable partnership. They hadn't rushed to combine households, but Daniel and his daughter Maddie were frequent visitors to Emily's apartment, which she had finally purchased last year when her position at the community center had been expanded to Director of Community Engagement. Robert sat directly in front of Emily, his mother Eleanor beside him, and his girlfriend Lisa on the other side. In the 2.5 years they had been together, Lisa had become an integral part of their extended family circle, her warmth and straightforward nature making her a natural fit for their unconventional arrangement. Robert's contracting business with Mike and Tony had flourished, specializing in high-end custom carpentry and restoration work that had garnered attention throughout the region. As the elementary school principal welcomed the audience of parents and family members, Emily felt a tap on her shoulder. Jessica Parker leaned forward from the row behind, whispering, "Chloe looks so grown up." Hard to believe she was barely out of diapers when all this started. Emily nodded, smiling at her friend. Jessica's business consulting firm had expanded to 3 employees, and the financial literacy program she and Emily had started now operated as an independent non-profit, serving women throughout the state. What had begun as a response to personal crisis had blossomed into a mission that had helped hundreds of women reclaim their financial independence. Tanya sat beside Jessica, having taken the morning off from her law practice to attend the event. The pro bono program she had developed for women facing financial fraud during divorce had become a model adopted by several neighboring counties, with Emily serving as a regular consultant and speaker. The classroom teacher, Ms. Martinez, stepped to the microphone. "Our first graders have prepared special presentations about their families. Each student will introduce the important people in their lives and share what makes their family unique. Let's begin with Chloe Johnson." Chloe stepped forward, her posture confident as she faced the audience. "My family doesn't all live in the same house," she began clearly, "but we're still a family because families are made of love, not just roofs." A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the audience. Emily felt a swell of pride at her daughter's poise and wisdom. "My mom lives with me most of the time," Chloe continued, pointing toward Emily. "She teaches ladies about money, so they can take care of themselves, and she helps people have better parties at the community center. She shows me that girls can be strong and smart and fix their own problems." Emily blinked back sudden tears as Daniel squeezed her hand. "My dad lives in his house with the big workshop," Chloe went on, turning her attention to Robert. "He builds beautiful things with wood, and he teaches me that it's important to tell the truth even when it's hard, and that mistakes are how we learn to be better. Sometimes his special friend Ms. Lisa is there too, and she designs pretty rooms and makes the best chocolate chip pancakes." Lisa beamed at this mention, while Robert's expression reflected both amusement and tenderness. "My grandpa," Chloe said, gesturing to Richard, "lets me help build birdhouses in his garage and always listens to my stories, even the really long ones. And my grandma Eleanor teaches me about gardening and says that families are like gardens. They need lots of care and sometimes pruning, but they can grow beautiful things." Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, visibly moved by her granddaughter's words. "I also have my almost sister Maddie and her dad, Mr. Daniel, who reads the best bedtime stories and knows everything about nature. They don't live with us yet, but sometimes we all have sleepovers and make pancakes in the morning." Daniel chuckled softly at this candid assessment of their relationship status. He and Emily had been discussing the possibility of moving in together, but had decided to wait until the girls finished the school year before making any changes. "My family used to be different," Chloe acknowledged with the straightforward honesty of a 6-year-old. "When I was little, I told a big truth in a courtroom and lots of grown-up problems happened. I was scared sometimes, but my mom and dad both told me it wasn't my fault, and that truth is always important even when it's hard. Emily exchanged a glance with Robert. Their shared history acknowledged in that brief connection. The pain, the healing, the gradual rebuilding of trust in a different form. Now my family is bigger and different, but also better, Chloe concluded confidently, because everyone is more honest and happy, and I get to have lots of people who love me. My dad says sometimes things have to break all the way down, so you can build them back stronger, like when he fixes old furniture. My mom says family isn't what it looks like from outside. It's how it feels on the inside. As Chloe returned to her seat among her classmates to enthusiastic applause, Emily found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the devastation of betrayal to the patient work of rebuilding, from the awkwardness of early co-parenting to the comfortable rhythm they had now established, it had been a transformation none of them could have imagined on that day in the courtroom 3 years ago. After the ceremony, the families gathered in the school cafeteria for refreshments. Chloe and Maddie darted between the adults, proud of their presentations and excited for the approaching summer vacation. Emily found herself standing with Robert near the punch bowl, watching their daughter. She was amazing up there, Robert said, his pride evident. So poised and articulate, Emily nodded. She's always had a gift for speaking her truth. Even at 3, Robert smiled ruefully. Thank God for that. Who knows how much longer I would have continued down that path if she hadn't blown the whistle on me. You might have figured it out eventually, Emily offered generously. Maybe, but probably not before doing even more damage. Robert's expression grew serious. I've been meaning to tell you, we're working on a restoration project for the old Preston mansion on Oak Street. The new owners want to convert it to a women's resource center. When I mentioned your work with the financial literacy program, they asked if you might be interested in consulting on the design of the educational spaces. Emily was touched by the professional referral. I'd love to. That building has such potential, and the location is perfect for outreach. That's what I told them. Lisa's handling the interior design, but she suggested we bring you in early to make sure the functionality matches your programming needs. Robert hesitated. It's a significant project, could lead to more visibility for your program. This thoughtful consideration of her professional goals, so different from the dismissive attitude Robert had sometimes shown toward her work during their marriage, was yet another marker of how far they had both come. Thank you, Emily said sincerely. That means a lot. As Daniel approached with cups of punch for them, Robert nodded a greeting and excused himself to join Lisa, who was chatting with Eleanor and Richard nearby. Emily noticed with amusement that her father and former mother-in-law had developed a warm friendship over the past few years, united by their shared devotion to Chloe and their involvement in the garden club at the community center. Successful event, Daniel observed, handing Emily a cup. Chloe was eloquent as usual, though I'm not sure the entire school needed to know about our pancake sleepovers. Emily laughed. Kids and their boundless honesty. Maddie was wonderful too. Her presentation about blended families was so thoughtful. Daniel smiled. She's been working on that "When are we all going to live together" campaign for months now. Pretty persuasive, isn't she? Very, Emily agreed, her eyes meeting his with warmth. Good thing I was already convinced. They had decided the previous week that they would begin house hunting after the school year ended, looking for a place with enough room for all 4 of them and close enough to Robert's home to maintain Chloe's custody schedule without disruption. It was a big step, but one that felt right after 3 years of careful relationship building. Across the cafeteria, Emily spotted Jessica, deep in conversation with Chloe's teacher, Ms. Martinez. When Jessica caught her eye and beckoned, Emily excused herself to Daniel and made her way over. Emily, I was just telling Ms. Martinez about our summer financial literacy workshop for educators, Jessica explained. She's interested in incorporating some of the basic concepts into the first-grade math curriculum. That's a wonderful idea, Emily enthused. We've been wanting to develop age-appropriate materials for elementary students. As the 3 women discussed possibilities, Emily marveled at how organically her personal experience had evolved into professional purpose. The financial literacy program that had begun as a way to help women like herself had expanded its mission to include preventative education, teaching financial independence and awareness from an early age. The conversation was interrupted when Chloe appeared at Emily's side, tugging at her hand. "Mummy, can we go to the park after this? Daddy said he could come too and bring the kites we made in his workshop. And Grandpa and Grandma want to come, and Maddie and Mr. Daniel too. Like a family picnic, but with all our family." Emily smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "I think that sounds perfect, sweetheart. Why don't you go ask Ms. Lisa if she wants to join us too?" As Chloe dashed off on her mission, Ms. Martinez regarded Emily with admiration. "She's a remarkable child, so emotionally intelligent and secure, despite having what some might consider a complicated family situation." "She is remarkable," Emily agreed. "But I think it's partly because we've all been honest with her. Appropriate to her age, of course. Children are incredibly resilient when they're surrounded by truth and love, even if the structure doesn't match the traditional model." Later that afternoon, Emily sat on a blanket at Riverside Park, watching as Robert and Daniel helped the girls launch the handcrafted kites into the June sky. Despite their different temperaments and backgrounds, the two men had gradually developed a respectful relationship centered on their shared commitment to the children's well-being. It hadn't always been easy. There had been moments of tension and awkwardness, but they had worked through them with maturity that still sometimes surprised Emily. Lisa settled on the blanket beside her, offering a container of strawberries. "Those kites are engineering marvels." Robert and the girls spent 3 weekends perfecting the designs. Emily accepted the fruit with a smile. "They're beautiful. Very different from the plastic ones I had as a kid." "Robert's happiest when he's creating something tangible," Lisa observed. The corporate world never suited him, though he tried so hard to fit himself into that mold. The insight resonated with Emily, who had witnessed Robert's struggle to live up to his father's legacy. It took losing everything for him to find his true path. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes that's how it works. The facade has to crumble before the authentic self can emerge." She glanced at Emily. "He's told me everything, you know, about the deception, the financial mess, Chloe's courtroom moment. He's deeply remorseful still." "I know," Emily acknowledged. "We've both made peace with it. Not because what happened was okay, but because holding on to anger would only have poisoned Chloe's world and our own." Across the park, Richard and Eleanor had found a bench in the shade, engaged in what appeared to be a spirited discussion of the community garden's latest challenges. The friendship that had developed between Emily's father and Robert's mother had been an unexpected gift of their divorce. Two people who might never have connected deeply, if not for the crisis that had forced them to support their children through difficult times. Tanya approached the blanket, returning from a phone call with her office. "Sorry about that. Even on Saturdays, the legal emergencies don't stop." She settled beside Emily. "You know, watching all this," she gestured toward the flying kites, the conversing grandparents, "the easy interaction between current and former partners, it's pretty remarkable. Most of my divorce clients can barely manage a civil handoff in a McDonald's parking lot 3 years post-decree." "We had good guidance," Emily said, thinking of Dr. Reynolds' patient counseling in those early months. "And a powerful motivation." Her eyes followed Chloe's movements as the little girl ran across the grass, her face tilted toward her soaring kite. Jessica joined them, balancing paper cups of lemonade from the park's concession stand. "Speaking of guidance, I've been meaning to tell you, the State Women's Commission has approved funding for our financial literacy curriculum to be distributed to community colleges statewide. They want us to conduct train-the-trainer sessions this fall." As her friends discussed the logistics of the expanded program, Emily watched the scene before her with a sense of profound gratitude. The journey that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak had led through pain and perseverance to this moment of genuine contentment. Not the picture-perfect life she had once envisioned, but something more authentic and perhaps more valuable. The shadows were lengthening across the park when Robert called everyone together for a group photo. As they arranged themselves, children in front, adults behind, grandparents seated on the bench, Emily found herself standing between Daniel and Robert, their extended, Blended family unit captured in a moment of harmony that had been hard-won through years of effort and growth. Everyone say, family, Robert instructed, setting the camera timer before rushing to join the group. Family, they chorused as the shutter clicked. Later that evening, after the park outing had concluded and they had returned to Emily's apartment for pizza, Chloe approached, her mother with a serious expression. "Mommy, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, sweetheart," Emily replied, setting aside the plates she was clearing from the coffee table. "Today at school, when I told about the courtroom and the big truth I said when I was little," Chloe began, her brow furrowed in concentration, "I remembered something I've been wondering about." Emily sat down, giving her daughter her full attention. "What is it?" "When I told about Daddy hiding your sparkly things, everyone got really upset.